Welcome to the Fantasy Fangirls Podcast, where two sisters dive deep into beloved fantasy lore, characters, themes, theories, and more. I'm Lexi.
And I'm Nicole.
And today we are getting into the festive spirit with A Court of Frost and Starlight by Sarah J. Maas. This episode 1 covers chapters 1 through 14 of the holiday novella. If you're new here, first of all, hi, welcome to the Fantasy Fangirls party.
While you're not required to first tune into our 8 episodes of ACOTAR, our 11 episodes of ACOMAF, and our 11 episodes of ACOWAR, because that's a lot of episodes, we get it, this deep dive conversation is building off of what we've already talked about at length during our coverage of the series. So if you like this episode, you're probably going to love listening to us talk about a much deeper story in those other 30 episodes we've done.
As always, let's start with our content warnings. And new listeners, you really want to hear this when it comes to spoilers. While we're focusing today's discussion on the first half of Frost and Starlight and the novella as a whole, we are going to bring in themes, foreshadowing, lore, and other insights across the entire ACOTAR series. So yes, that does mean that you need to have finished A Court of Silver Flames before listening to today's episode. These deep dives do not, however, include spoilers for the rest of Sarah J. Maas' series, except at the end of every episode, where we have our Maasverse Madness segment. We'll give a big spoiler warning beforehand, so you can leave the episode if you have not read the Maasverse, or you can keep listening for Throne of Glass and /or Crescent City callouts.
So with all of that said, if you do not know the most important moment of the entire ACOTAR series, because it happens in this episode, and that is Fae-vorite and Cassian drunk decorating, then please go finish the series. We will be here when you're done.
Next, we at Fantasy Fangirls are adults who say adult things about adult books. In other words, friends, this podcast is rated R.
Guy sex! They believe they can fly indeed. So do please be mindful of those little listening ears.
Additionally, we are so excited to see you at upcoming live events.
We cannot wait for our Fantasy Fangirls live show at Comedy Works South in Denver, Colorado on October 20th. It's getting so soon. Our topic is going to be our biggest questions and predictions going into Onyx Storm, and general admission tickets are still available, but they're going fast.
We'll also be influencer partners at the Swords and Shadows Masquerade by Mountains of Magic in Highlands Ranch, Colorado on November 23rd.
You can also dance the night away with us at the Fantastique Collection New Year's Eve drop party in Denver, Colorado.
And we have so much in store as podcast partners at Romantasy BookCon in Los Angeles on February 20th through 22nd in 2025.
Links to get more information and tickets to all of these events are in the show notes.
And lastly, if you love Fantasy Fangirls and have been loving this ACOTAR series journey we're on together, if you want more content, more community, more events, and just more all around, please check out our Patreon.
We have 3 tiers that you can join. The Valkyries, which includes access to our book club that sometimes features authors for live Q&As, like our October book club, which will have Teresa Weeks. She is joining us for our discussion on The Witch Collector. We cannot wait to interview her. We're so excited. This first tier also includes access to our Boppin' Discord, live Q&As from Lexi and I, community events, promo codes for live events, plus a 20% off discounted merch link. That is all for $5 a month. Or you can join the High Fae, which includes everything from the Valkyrie level, plus early access to ad-free episodes, our full episode outlines, and special voting privileges. That is for $10 a month. And last but not least, we have our highly requested and newest tier, the Inner Circle, which includes everything from the first 2 tiers, plus behind-the-scenes content, a welcome gift from Lexi and I, giveaways, a private Discord channel, it's called The Dining Room, and your name shouted out on the podcast. That is for $25 a month.
Join the party at patreon.com/fantasyfangirls. The link is also in the show notes. And really and truly, friends, thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts. As we've turned this podcast into our livelihood, it's all because of you.
And now, the best way to spread winter solstice cheer is to sing loud for all to hear.
For those of you who are watching this on YouTube, yes, we are wearing our sweaters. I am like, and this is just literally what I live in the winter time. And I'm so happy, even though it's like 80 degrees outside today.
I was going to say, I kind of half-assed the sweater game today because I was like, it's hot.
To kick off every episode, Nicole does us the honor of summarizing what happens in the stretch of chapters. So gather round, friends. We need an Inner Circle debrief for the first half of Frost and Starlight, chapters 1 through 14.
Chapter 1, Fae-vorite. It's beginning to look a lot like winter solstice. After several months of getting back to normal after the war, we spend the first chapter getting a quick recap. Fae-vorite is still haunted by almost losing her mate, so she's burying herself in work. Healthy. Reese has been going to visit their allies to make sure all is good and no one's being being an idiot. Clearly, he's not thinking about Tamlin. Cassian is doing regular checkups with the Illyrians. Nesta's living in her own apartment in the only slum of Valaris. And Elaine is planting flowers. Still not potatoes, though. TLDR, our crew is very busy. Sounds like they need a holiday. Chapter 2. In the mountains of Illyria, Rhys and Cassian are fighting with Devlin, the camp leader. Because according to Devlin, it's 1950, and the females belong in the kitchen prepping for the holiday, not the training ring. But luckily, they work out a deal. 90 minutes of training, and then they can all holiday prep. Rhys and Cassian leave for the High Lord cabin, and all Rhys can do is think about bang, bang, bangity banging his mate on every surface, even recalling their most recent flying escapade in the sky. It's a bird! It's a plane! Oh God! No, it's not! We learned that there's my eyes!
Although honestly, I'd be like, ooh.
Lexi!
I guess I've been reading too much Bonded by Thorns.
I was gonna say, goodness, madam. We learn that there's tension brewing among the Illyrian clans because the warriors who have been bred for battle are pissed off that they went to battle. Chapter 3, Cassian goes on a solo flight past Ramiel, and we get the not at all setting up for Silver Flames rundown of how the blood rite works. He continues to pass through the old village where his mother lived years ago, a village that is now destroyed thanks to him and his brothers, and he takes a pit stop next to an unmarked area where he mourns his mother. Chapter 4, somewhere over the Valaris rainbow, Feyre meets a Fae woman who she remembers from the Highburn attack last spring. Welcome to the chat, Ricinia. Ricinia shows Feyre a boarded up studio of one of the dead artists. Wanna buy it, Feyre? Ricinia, artist and Valaris realtor. She tells Feyre that she hosts painting parties, the Valaris paint and sip, if you will, and invites Feyre to come and arty party with them. Feyre deflects, unsure if she's ready to paint around people yet. Feyre continues her jaunt through Valaris, where Moore comes to join, telling her that they're going to take a trip to the Hewn City for their annual office party. I think Angela Martin plans happier parties. But that's not the only reason they're going to spread holiday cheer. Moore has heard from super spy Asriel that Eris will be there. Why? They don't know. Dun dun dun. Chapter 5, Feyre. Rhys returns home from Windhaven and is happy to see his mate for more than like 5 seconds. They wonder if Nesta will be joining them for the winter solstice celebration, to which Rhys admits, unsurprisingly, that the eldest Archeron sister, not his favorite. Conversation turns more feral, and just as Feyre wraps her hand around Rhys's more bangs on the door, telling Rhys that he better start primping. So needing to calm down, Rhys takes an ice cold bath. Chapter 6, more. At the Hewn City, we immediately see that Eris's visit seems harmless, and instead he's just here to wish them a happy solstice. I guess he's not a fan of holiday cards. Moore's thoughts drift to that day where she was nailed in the abdomen and dumped on the Autumn Court doorstep, where Eris was telling his men not to touch her, because apparently it's like calling shotgun, and if they do, she's their responsibility. Seems like there's more to the story. But back to the meeting at the Court of Nightmares. We learn that Baron, the High Lord of Autumn, has been a douche canoe and is looking to expand his territory. Where? South to the Spring Court and to the Human Lands. But oh no, don't worry. I'm sure the South Territory won't let that happen. Oh wait, it's Tamlin. Looks like Rhys has to pay him a visit. Chapter 7, Rhys. Spy Master Asriel brings Rhys a list of the Illyrian clans where shit seems to be stirring up. Like, a lot of clans. Like, a lot of clans. I'm sure that will have some kind of consequence in a future book, right? Right? The two Bat Boys decide not to tell their third brother, though, instead letting him enjoy the holiday before they might need to protect against a civil war. They discuss Lucian and his whereabouts for the holiday, but don't worry, Asriel has most definitely not been spying on him. Nope, not at all. Chapter 8, Cassian. Back in Illyria, Cassian visits a clothing shop where he meets the owner, the daughter of Proteus, who is a recently deceased asshole. Cassian purchases every drop of clothing and tells the new shop owner, Emery, to deliver these clothes to the people who will need it most in the oncoming storm. Cassian, stop being perfect. Chapter 9, Feyre. Nervously heading to the rainbow with every intent to go to Ricinia's paint and sip party, Feyre cannot seem to get herself across the threshold. So instead, she winnows to the abandoned boarded up gallery and paints there. Chapter 10, Feyre. She paints and paints and paints. What does she paint? The beastly version of herself that she saw in the Ouroboros mirror. Chapter 11, Rhys notices that it looks like the angry man-bear pig has been using his manor as a scratching post. The haggard Tamlin takes Rhys to the only clean-ish room in the Springcourt Manor, and Rhys has it out on Tamlin. Rhys tells him that he's deserved everything that has befallen onto him. Damn, Rhys, tell us how you really feel. But Tamlin doesn't fight back. Instead, he hangs his head, utterly broken. Rhys winnows to his mate and tells her everything. But oh no, he still needs to shop for a gift for her. So he goes shopping, not finding anything for Feyre, but instead finding not one, not two, but 3 jewel necklaces for Amryn, because that really needed to be included in this. Chapter 12, Fae-vorite, time to decorate. Cassian and Fae-vorite get shit-stick drunk together and attempt to decorate the townhouse, but Azriel joined and has to correct their terrible designs. Sadly, it turns out that Nesta told Elaine that she will not be coming to Winter Solstice and does not want to see them at all. Yikes. So Fae-vorite goes out into the city to have a chat with her sister. Chapter 13, Fae-vorite, in a seedy bar, Fae-vorite finds Nesta playing cards, drinking, and deciding who her one-night stand is going to be. Fae-vorite tries to get her to agree to come to Winter Solstice using every guilt trip in the book, including father would want you to come. Damn it, Fae-vorite, go for the throat, why don't ya? But she does find one tactic that will work. Money for rent. Hit me in the millennial, why don't ya, SJM? Chapter 14. Rhys tells his third Moore that in the coming month, he has a mission for her. What's the sitch, Rhys? There's an issue with treaty negotiations on the continent, and he will need her to go, but not until after the holiday.
It's so important to make sure that we check in with ourselves throughout the day, and Lumen makes that easy. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. Yes, that's right. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. Then on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs and gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workouts, sleep, and even stress management. I love me a good app with an easy-to-use interface, and still after weeks of using Lumen, I am just so impressed at Lumen's capabilities and how it informs me about my body and my health.
All you have to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know exactly what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning mostly fat or carbs. Then Lumen gives you a personalized nutrition plan for the day based on your measurements. You can also breathe into it right before and after workouts and meals, so you know exactly what's going on for your body in real time. And Lumen will give you tips to keep on top of your health game. I did like a triathlon sort of situation yesterday. It was not a full one. It was like a little sprint one. And I was breathing into the Lumen before and after, and it was fascinating to see the results. It was so cool.
There you go, YouTube. Your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food you eat into fuel that keeps you going. Because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic health translates to a bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, and better sleep.
So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/FFG to get 15% off your Lumen. That's LUMEN.me/FFG to get 15% off your purchase. Thank you so much, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode.
It's time to step into the cauldron and discuss key insights, character analysis, lore, foreshadowing, theories, and so much more. First, with Frost and Starlight, let's address the obvious. This is a novella that is very different from the rest of the ACOTAR series. In the grand scheme of the series plot, it can be considered inconsequential, but we can't wait to discuss themes that contribute to the bigger story and especially character developments. It's best to go into this novella with the expectation that it is a holiday special with wholesome vibes and low-risk conflict, which I'll argue is good for us readers after the emotional roller coasters and intensity of the previous 3 books. Celebrating life and being together as a family is exactly what our crew fought for, risked everything for, and now we get to see them simply do that, which we don't often get in sequels after reading the main characters be victorious in their high-risk showdowns. Frost and Starlight focuses on the aftermath of the war and looking ahead to the future. It serves as both an epilogue for Fae-vorite and Rhys's trilogy and a prologue for Cassian and Nesta. This novella is the bridge between 2 very different books that focus on different characters. In the first 3 ACOTAR books, we were of course in Thera's POV with occasional Rhys POV. In Silver Flames, it'll switch to be third person, Cassian and Nessa's POVs. Frost and Starlight combines all of these, with each chapter focusing on a different character POV. Is it a little strange in this novella to read some first person, some third person? I suppose so. I can see why it bothers some readers, but to me, it's not really glaring or distracting.
I'll be honest, it was a little jarring for me, and it felt hard to get immersed in the story for that reason. But also, this is a story that's like 200 pages long. So it's also a little hard to get immersed in the story just because the length is so different from what we're used to. I do love the theory that the reason Cassian, Moore, and Nesta are all in third-person POV versus Fae-vorite and Rhys's first-person POV is because Rhys and Fae-vorite, for lack of a better term, at the end of the day, they are telling the story. It's almost like the others let Rhys and Fae-vorite into their own minds so that they could write their stories as well. But of course, course, they're going to write it in third-person POV, whereas when they're going to their own story, they're going to write it in first. Do I think that this is accurate? Maybe, maybe not, but it's enough of a reason and a why behind it that it's what my brain needed in order to buy into the shift.
I can appreciate how this novella neatly wraps up Fae-vorite and Rhys's main character story, and it sets the tone for the internal conflict specifically for Nesta before we head into Silver Flames.
And it's interesting because we only get one Nesta POV. I'm not even going to say chapter because it's not a chapter, it's a section, but it tells us everything we need to know in prep to be in her head and go on her journey with her.
Exactly. And I also love getting an update about her from other characters' POVs too, because that really does set us up well for Silver Flames when she feels like it's the world against her. I love, of course, too, getting Cassian's POV for the first time, I guess minus the Mist and Fury bonus chapter. And we learn more about his mother, the blood right, his relationship with his Bat Boy brothers, and his complicated feelings about Illyrians.
So when I first read Frost and Starlight, I did not know it was a novella. And I was opening up my audiobook app and I saw that it was only like 6 hours. And I was like, what the fuck is this? Like quite frankly, I was disappointed because I did not know and I didn't adjust my own expectations, like you were saying earlier, Lex. I mean, we're coming off of a book where the biggest problem is like, how do we save the world against evil as we know it? And now the biggest problem is, what do I get Rhys for the holiday season? And that's why when people joke that it's the Hallmark holiday movie of ACOTAR, I personally do not disagree with them. And when I read it a second time, and then of course, again, for the deep dive, I feel like I understand its purpose more. I feel like its place in the story, like you were saying earlier, it is that bridge that you were talking about, Lexi. And if we didn't have it, it maybe would have hurt the Silver Flames experience. We'd be wondering why Nesta was being so weird. How did Elaine and Feyre get so close? Where the hell is Mor? Rhys and Feyre are preggo. What changed in her mindset and what they wanted for their future? All of which would have been really confusing and just too much to slam into Silver Flames. And with that said, it does rank last for me. And I don't think it's trying to be your favorite ACOTAR book. I think it's supposed to be towards the bottom because it is a simple holiday feel-good special.
Yeah. The first time I read Frost and Starlight, I dragged through it. And remember how I kept wanting to DNF it? And you kept encouraging me, saying that my treat for finishing it is that then I get to read Silver Flames, which honestly, I wasn't even too crazy about at the time either. I just felt so complete with the story that we got at the end of ACOWAR. In fact, as we talked about doing ACOTAR for our podcast deep dive, I initially told Nicole I refused to do more than one episode for Frost and Starlight.
No. You said you wouldn't show up if we did any more recording than one episode. You said you would not show up to the recording.
I did say that, didn't I? But now, on a reread, and after I finished Silver Flames, I appreciate this novella and understand why it is necessary for the series. And that's our goal for you, our listeners, with these 2 episodes, because there are some impactful themes in this novella while also letting us simply enjoy time with these beloved characters. Some of the most fun scenes of the series is from this novella, and we get to know the essence of who these characters are when high stakes are stripped away. And like I mentioned, it's such a good setup for Silver Flames between how the characters have developed and the different POVs. Like Nicole, though, I do rank Frost and Starlight number 5 on my ACOTAR series ranking. I sometimes go back and forth with A Court of Thorns and Roses and this novella as my lowest ranking. Frost and Starlight is set in my favorite place during my favorite time of year, and I get lots of time with my favorite characters, in other words, Cassian. But then the last third of ACOTAR took me on quite the emotional journey when I was just on the edge of my seat the entire time. So because it does that, and Frost and Starlight definitely doesn't, because again, that's not what this book is for, I'll have to put ACOTAR above Frost and Starlight. Last thing before we jump into the main part of our conversation, you'll notice that our Frost and Starlight deep dive coverage will be a little different than our usual episodes. We're going to focus more on themes and topics, so it won't be the familiar chapter by chapter breakdown. This format works better for us as we cover this novella, so we hope you like the change up before we go back to our mostly chronological coverage in Silver Flames. Technically, today's episode focuses on what comes up in chapters 1 through 14, but we will bring in bits from the rest of the novella if it adds to the topic, and we will be skimming over other parts in this first half to really dive into next episode. Okay, now let's really dive into this novella, shall we? We immediately learn that it's the first snowfall of winter in Velaris, which means that it's been 4 to 5 months since our story ended in ACOWAR. The aftermath of the war still weighs heavily on the city, its people, and our crew. Our inner circle is keeping busy and staying focused on the million tasks at hand, partly because, of course, it all needs to get done, but staying busy also keeps their trauma and thoughts at bay. Velaris continues its rebuilding efforts after the attacks from Hybern. The people of Valaris truly rose to the challenge of rebuilding and starting multiple societies to assist the city. Some of these efforts include finding homes for those displaced by the destruction, supporting and providing resources for families affected by the war, and helping those without shelters or belongings to get ready for winter with warm clothing and supplies. Valaris isn't just a city. It is a community of neighbors who care about one another and dearly love their city. Valaris and its people embody peace, unity, and prosperity, and that's reflected not just in the culture and their day-to-day, but how they come together for the rebuilding efforts. Feyre volunteers with a handful of these societies, wanting to help as much as she can with this community. Yes, she is their leader, and she is still figuring out her role as High Lady of the Night Court after the war, but I think more than anything, this is her way of becoming part of the community as a fellow neighbor. She's also needing to stay busy, and this is easing some of her guilt for not having done, quote, enough during the Hybern attack.
Rhys is looking a little bit more bigger picture, though. He has been visiting the war allies to solidify relationships, to keep tabs on everyone's post-wall intentions, and of course, he's been building trade. Obviously, since Papa Archeron is dead, someone has to. And they say you marry people like your parents.
Speaking of what our favorite couple is up to these days, let's recap how these characters are doing since we last saw them at the height of summer. Don't worry, I will be going into the political state of things in today's Suriel Teatime.
Let's kick it off with Elaine. Elaine has been focusing on her own healing since the end of the war. Much like when Feyre came to Valaris from the Spring Court, there are some good days and there are some hard days. Elaine is really finding a rhythm. She's ready the townhouse garden for winter. She's baking and cooking with Nuala and Caradwyn. She's enjoying the humming of the city of Valaris. She visits her father's grave at least once a month.
However, Elaine's relationship with Nesta is strenuous these days. She's over trying to bring Nesta into this family in their life, and she's tired of being hurt by her sister.
She's also been quiet about her powers, and the rest of the Inner Circle is not really sure if the Cauldron's destruction and reformation, if her powers even still exist, which personally, I'm assuming they still do. But she does bring them up to Feyre in a more casual manner. So I will say that it feels to me like her powers are becoming more normalized. They're starting to really sink in that this is part of her life now. And of course, like I mentioned in our ACOFAS final episode, we do have no mention of the engagement ring on her finger, which I take to mean that she's slowly closing the door on her once human life and starting to maybe not picture the future, but she's starting to really solidify and at least find ease in the day-to-day. However, she still has moments where she wishes for that previous life of hers. Halfway through Frost and Starlight at dinner with the Inner Circle, Amren is talking about choosing the high fame form of hers, and Elaine starts asking questions. However, Amren starts making things a little uncomfortable, and she says, quote, "Are you asking out of curiosity for my past or your own future? AKA, are you trying to gather information about becoming human again?" Elaine deflects with a cold, which is not a word we usually associate with Elaine. Quote, "I don't know what you're talking about." Again, there are those good days and then there are those hard days.
Feyre notes that Elaine is silently mourning her lost human lives too, and specifically mourning Grayson. So yes, it's possible to both find rhythm and partially acceptance in this new life while still very much mourning the old one. Feyre asks Elaine if she's doing all right, as in all right overall. And Elaine gives a smile that isn't genuine. I think that right there sums up what she's going through.
There is one thing that is staying pretty much consistent, though, and that is she has no interest in getting to know Lucian. She's too polite to outright send him away, but that doesn't stop her from basically ignoring him until he gets the hint and leaves her alone. Elaine is on her own healing journey. And just like when Feyre was on her own healing journey, Rhys stayed away from her in a romantic way, I'll say. But Nicole, they bantered and they flirted. Yes, they also had a previous relationship from Under the Mountain where that was very much a part of it. Elaine and Lucian don't. The mating bond was really thrust upon them. And while I really do feel for Lucian because he is wanting to get to know his mate and because we have spent 3 books with him, we know him, we love him, and we want him to just be fucking wanted for once and happy. But Elaine doesn't know him in this way. And in this stage of her life, she has no interest in doing so. And part of me really does get it from Elaine's point of view. If I was her, I would wonder how much of him chooses to be with her versus feels obligated to court her because he is her mate, versus someone who really is definitely showing that he wants to and chooses to be around her. But more on that in a moment.
Exactly. Lucien is respectfully keeping his distance. He admits that it's too painful to be around his mate who is so obviously indifferent to him. He still feels that uncontrollable protective instinct as her mate, and he hopes that maybe someday there's a chance between them after she has moved on from Grayson. But until then, he is trying to figure out his own way that doesn't include trying to make headway with Elaine or letting Rhys pay for everything of his. While we're talking about Lucien, let's go ahead and dive into him. The day after he returned from the battlefields and the Spring Court, he took up residence in an elegant apartment down by the Sidra River. However, he is often gone for days or weeks at a time to stay in the mortal realm at an old manor with Vassa and Jurian. They call themselves the Band of Exiles, and Lucien is beginning to find comfort and purpose among his new friends who also feel like they don't have homes to call their own anymore. He is, I think, unofficially the Night Court's human emissary, sending twice weekly reports to Azriel and serving as the middleman between the Inner Circle and Jurian and Vassa. However, the Inner Circle is realizing he can't be trusted on these objective matters anymore because he's inevitably biased with his newfound friends. During these months, Thera hasn't asked Lucien anything about his initial visit to the Spring Court. The poor Lucien returned with a black eye and a cut lip. It's not just Tamlin who doesn't welcome him to live in the Spring Court anymore. It's the citizens of the territory too. Thera ruined any chance he had of returning to this home of his after how she brought Lucien into her revenge games at the beginning of ACOWAR. He still does visit the Spring Court now and then, and he has been planning to spend solstice with Tamlin, though as Rhys will realize, it's out of pity for the High Lord of Spring.
So basically, Lucien has been traveling a lot, and nothing is a better travel companion than a good book. You know us here at Fantasy Fangirls, we are always on the lookout for our next great book obsession. Whether you're searching for a hot thriller, a steamy romance, or a fantasy novel to sweep you away, bookshop.org has just the book you're looking for.
The best thing that we absolutely love about bookshop.org is that you can choose an independent bookstore to directly support with your purchase in your neighborhood or even across the country. You can feel good about buying books online with bookshop.org and know that your money is supporting independent bookstores.
Lexi and I both grew up in Boulder, Colorado, and there is a great independent bookstore, and we love being able to support it even if we can't make it into Boulder to buy books from it.
Yes. We can always support our favorite local bookstore, even from the comfort of our own home. It's amazing.
In just over 4 years, bookshop.org has raised over $32 million for local bookstores. Bookshop.org believes local bookstores are essential community hubs that foster culture, curiosity, and the love of reading. And we are committed to helping them survive and thrive. They're a certified B Corp and were named Best for the World by B Labs.
We have a special deal for our listeners. Use code FF to get 10% off your next order at bookshop.org. That's BOOKSHOP.org and use code FF to get 10% off your next order.
Let's move on to our favorite blue siphoned shadow daddy. Azriel also has been spying on the Hewn City, including knowing that Eris is going to be visiting soon.
He's been investigating the unrest with the Illyrian situation as well, and he does not have any good news to share from his findings, unfortunately. Azriel is also continuing to watch the human queens, who are suspiciously not acting suspicious.
Azriel is basically just right back into work as we know it. However, there's also a new development in his life, and that is being super duper gentlemanly manners to a certain Archeron sister. Let's talk about Elaine and Azriel because there's some tension in the air.
The lovey-dovey kind.
In the dining room at the townhouse, Azriel really flexes his gentlemanly muscles. And when Elaine is off to freshen up before dinner, Azriel tells everyone to wait in his commanding voice. Yes, sir. Azriel is really distancing himself from the, 500 years of unrequited love that was Mor. And I'm so happy for him. I really do wonder, has Azriel always been this gentlemanly dude? Which we have seen from him before. He's been bowing to Elaine. He's also been linking his arm with with her to escort her to the garden. But I wonder if that's just Elaine bringing out that side of him, because with Asriel, it really does feel like there's two opposing sides. There's the spy master and the torturer, which Feyre has wondered in the past if that's something Asriel even likes doing. And then there's this quiet gentleman, specifically with Elaine. And so I wonder if Elaine is bringing out more of this, I'll call it humanity side of him, that he hasn't been able to flex because he's been in let me carve you open with truth teller side. Unlike what I said earlier with Elaine and Lucien, her and Asriel did know each other before everything happened in Highburn. He came to the house when they were meeting with the mortal queens. Plus, through osmosis, Feyre trusts Asriel, and therefore it's easier for Elaine to trust him as well. Might I remind everyone that Lucien was with Tamlin, aka the dude who was made to blame along with Ianthe for Elaine and Nesta being thrown into the cauldron. So automatically, there's not good vibes there. Now, side note though, I do wonder how much Elaine knows about Asriel's work as Rhys's spy master, especially considering how Feyre was like, Elaine doesn't even like to go to Valaris' seedy taverns. But that could just be another moment of her sister coddling her.
I think that she does know, but probably just doesn't want to know the extent of it.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I could see Asriel distancing himself from that side and really wanting to lean into the more like peaceful, like quiet life that Elaine can, bring out in him.
Maybe. I think that he also has a lot of trouble with his self-worth, and his work is tied very much into his self-worth.
That is very factually accurate, yes.
Then we have my poor Cassian, who's been feeling the weight of responsibility with the Illyrians. In addition to his usual continuing to push for the females to train, there's starting to be whispers of ugly and dangerous unrest among the Illyrians after the war. They suffered the most losses when they took on the brunt of Highburn, and then they fell victim to the Cauldron's power. And they aren't letting Cassian forget about that, which is a punch in the gut for my Cassian. Quote, each injury, death, scar, he took them all as his own personal failings. Cassian is especially worried that with so many clans gathering for winter solstice, that this unrest will spread and worsen. He wants to stay back in Windhaven since a lot of Illyrians are coming to this war camp for solstice, and he can give out things that the children and females really need but are too proud to ask for.
I also wonder if part of the reason he wants to stay behind is because of his complications with Nesta. Yes, I do think a huge part of it is because of his complicated feelings towards the Illyrians and feeling very connected to them still. But I don't think he would want to stay behind to avoid seeing Nesta necessarily. It's more like seeing Nesta, whether that's actually in person or just feeling the lack of presence from Nesta if she's not there, would be just a blatant reminder to him of how much she doesn't want anything to do with him. And that's painful.
Absolutely. Rhys, however, will have none of that. While this Illyrian unrest needs to be dealt with, Cassian is wanted at home to be with the family. Rhys asks Cassian if he's happy, not unlike how Feyre asks Elaine if she's all right. And Cass responds, quote, I'm getting there, but there are shadows in his eyes. Which brings us to Cassian and Nesta. Oh boy. After all that they endured together during the Highburn battle, they don't speak to each other anymore. Of course, Cassian still loves her, but is giving her her distance because he understands her struggles after the battle. At least he's being patient and sympathetic for now. Stay tuned for next episode. He rarely lets himself think about her, and when he does, he takes out his anger on whatever poor soul he is up against in sparring ring. Nesta, on the other hand, is living in a dumpy apartment older than Rhys, located across the Sidra, in other words, far away from the townhouse. She insisted on living in the worst part of Valaris, which is saying something because it's a prosperous and well taken care of city. She has never visited Papa Archeron's grave, but she briefly sees Feyre a few times a month, and she does see Amren a few times a week, who will not betray her trust by gossiping about her. Go Amren! But besides that, Nesta keeps to herself and does what she wants, which mostly includes a lot of drinking in disreputable taverns, but hey, they do have good music. She also does a lot of gambling and sleeping around with males.
As Nesta is talking to Feyre in this tavern, Nesta tells her that, quote, it's not even our holiday. We don't have holidays. This we is aligning herself with the humans. However, in the opening chapters of Silver Flames, Nesta will say how she really does not feel like she aligns with either side. She doesn't feel like she's Fae. She doesn't feel like she's allowed in the human realm anymore. She's stuck in this limbo of the two, and it really just contributes to her feeling so lost.
Rhys has offered her job after job, but she refuses them all. As she says to Elaine, they have their lives and she has hers. She makes it clear she doesn't want to be part of this family.
Which the fact that she says this to Elaine is something, considering how Elaine has always been like my precious to her. And now she's even pushing her away.
And Elaine's like, fine, I give up then. Don't mind us as we skim over most of the Nesta parts in this first half of Frost and Starlight, because she is going to be big focus of next week's episode 2. And then, of course, she'll get her own book for us to deep dive right after that.
So let's move on to someone whose life is going pretty well for them, and that is Amren. After saving the world and the war and coming back as just a high fae, life is basically back to normal for our girl Amren.
Well, except for the fact that she's getting used to being a high fae. She's learning how to eat food, instead of drink blood, and use the restroom.
Which, yes, we will be talking about later. She's still someone who very much openly speaks her mind, and I almost seems more crabby about it than before, which is saying something. She still wants to make her mind work, and without Bob to decode, she is turned to puzzles, finishing multiple 5,000-piece puzzles a week, and they don't make them hard enough for her. My head just hurts thinking about that. I love a good puzzle. And of course, Amren still hates the cold, even earning the title of Angry Snowball from Cassian. But there is a new and notable part of Amren's life. That is our dude, Varian. He's spending solstice with them, and when Feyre visits Amren's apartment, she notes how there are traces of the Prince of Adriata, including in the bed sheets. The smell of sex is in the air. But he was not present in the apartment because he was out buying Amren more gifts for the holiday. Amren's love language is absolutely gift giving. 100%.
I was thinking the same thing. Absolutely. Mor continues to oversee the hewn city. She is not happy that her father and his minions will visit Valaris in the spring, but understands there is not much she can do about it, and she has to trust Rhys to handle it. Her and Rhys's relationship is still healing from during the war when she felt like he betrayed her with this deal, as well as allying with Eris. Working with Kier and Eris has dimmed something in Mor, though she hides it well. Recently, she's also spent more time at Rita's, which is apparently saying something, though from what we can gather, that does not mean she's seen anyone. She makes no note of it in her POVs, at least. And her secret of preferring females continues to be her secret that only Thera knows.
I almost even see it as she's not even thinking about it in her POV because it is so much not part of her waking daily life. That is how much she has distanced herself. And last but not least, let's cover some Rhys and Feyre. Despite the fact that they won the war and returned back to their haven of Valaris, Rhys and Feyre have been so busy to the point that they have taken to sky sex in order to see each other and feel their bodies. Which, quick side note, here's how that went down because it is freaking hilarious. They're flying down from the House of Wind. Rhys throws a cloak over them to make them invisible, which apparently all of the fandom, myself included, seems to forget sometimes. And after, quote, careful maneuvering and months of planning, they were going at it in the air like bunnies, only to crash on the rooftops. And then Feyre laughs and Rhys climaxes after crashing. To quote Rhys, not your finest moment, my guy. Right off the back from the first page of this novella, we know that Feyre waking up to the cold other side of the bed is nothing new. No morning snuggles for these two. I also look at this as after you get past the honeymoon stage of relationship and then, save the world, totally normal. And then it's now like the hustle and bustle of real life is catching up to them. Friendly reminder, it was roughly January of this same year that Rhys crashed Tamlin and Feyre's wedding. And then it wasn't until May of this same year that they were then mated. Then Feyre was off to the spring court for about a month. Then the rest of ACOWAR happened in about a month span. So that was like July-ish. So this is the longest stretch of normal life that these two have had. And it's really not even that normal, because despite doing the 100% healthy thing of burying yourself in work to avoid your trauma, one thing is for certain. These two are still very much haunted by everything that happened in their past, no matter how busy their schedules get. Even though Feyre knows Rhys logically is here, he is alive, they both survived, so much of that final battle still haunts her. She will be going through her day and, suddenly get this huge wave of PTSD, and suddenly she's back on the battlefield. She's seeing her father dying. The Illyrians are being blasted out of the sky. The Bone Carver, Striga, they're dead. Nesta, Cassian, almost dead. Of course, Rhys is dying. Because of the rawness of remembering what it feels like to have their mating bond hollow out and to see her mate dead on the ground, there are nights where she clings to him tighter and moments in the bright sunshine where she'll even grip his hand. Remember one of the last scenes at the end of ACOWAR? They're coming back to the townhouse and everything seems the same, but it's different because they are changed. And now we're seeing the anxiety and the fear in the aftermath. But also going back to Fae-vorite, in ACOMAF, Fae-vorite had what I would have, been calling anxiety attacks from under the mountain. We're seeing something similar here. Her sentences get shorter. She starts to spiral a little bit. You can almost feel her starting to hyperventilate. But in Frost and Starlight, Fae-vorite has coping mechanisms. Yay! Quote, I clenched my fingers into a fist, breathing in through my nose, out through my mouth until the lightness in my limbs faded, until the walls of the room stopped pressing in on me. Go, Fae-vorite! So happy for you.
Fae-vorite notes that Rhys's eyes sometimes turn distant and sometimes he blinks at his loved ones as if he doesn't quite believe he's here. When Fae-vorite returned from the dead, she grappled with her inner demons and she withered away. She didn't feel like she deserved the second chance and she had never felt so alone, trapped in her feelings of unworthiness.
Rhys, on the other hand, is worried that all of this, his mate, his family, his friends, his happiness, it is all some kind of cosmic joke that he still has to pay for, which Cassian reminds him, my guy, you did pay for it. You freaking died. Our self-sacrificer still has not done enough, apparently. It strikes again. Rhys has finally had all that he's ever wanted, and yet it feels like it's going to be taken from him at any moment. And I'm not going to lie, this feels so relatable. It's almost like whenever life gets so good and you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. I know, Lexi, you and I have talked about that with Fantasy Fangirls on multiple occasions. It's like, this is too good. It feels like something's going to happen. All of this to say, everyone in our story is so busy repairing the city or themselves that the inner court has barely gathered for more than a few hours since the end of ACOWAR. AKA, it's time for a holiday.
Knowing how busy the inner circle is, they sure are having a hard time taking care of themselves. When life gets busy, it's hard to ensure your body gets all the nutrients it needs. I know I'm like that too, but AG1 helps you do just that. Since I started using AG1, I've noticed a real difference in my daily health. I have more energy, my tummy feels happy, which is a really big deal for me, and I know that I'm starting each day off right.
AG1 is packed with nutrients and vitamins that you need to get your gut operating at its best all day long. I love how easy it is to incorporate AG1 into my daily routine. Literally every single morning, first thing in the morning, Brett and I put a scoop of AG1 into water or even into our smoothie, for feeling fun like we are this morning, and boom, we're ready to go. It truly makes looking after ourselves so easy.
If there's one product we had to recommend to elevate your health, it's AG1. And that's why we love having them as a partner. If you want to take ownership of your health too, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase at drinkag1.com/FFG. That's drinkag1.com/FFG. Check it out. It's 1 week before winter solstice, and it's top of mind for Fae-vorite that she was in the spring court last winter solstice, with Ianthe performing an odious ceremony, and she was about to marry Tamlin. Here in Velaris, winter solstice is very different. Yes, there are religious ceremonies to attend for those who want to, though the inner circle takes a casual but very festive approach to the holiday. Remember that winter solstice is also the longest night of the year, so this is one of the Night Court's big holiday celebrations because they celebrate, of course, the longest night of the year for the Night Court. This holiday is intimate, warm, and lovely with presents, music, food, and feasting. Most importantly, it is a special time for the family to come together, rest, and simply enjoy each other's company, which is why this is the perfect backdrop for this novella. It's rare these days for the inner circle to be together for more than a few hours because of all their busy schedules. The world's problems and the never-ending work is paused for this holiday celebration, and the main focus is on family and gratitude. Fae-vorite, who keeps trying to throw herself into her volunteer work, but no one will let her because they insist she has been working almost every day and she's earned a week off. Then there's Rhys, practically forcing Cassian to stop working and come hang out at the house. I love that little nugget that out of any of them, Cassian has the most difficult time resting. I've never been able to relate so much to our characters. No wonder they're all so busy, since it seems like the inner circle deals with running the whole territory themselves. Like, for instance, I will never get over this. Like, for instance, I appreciate how Rhys and Fae-vorite as High Lord and Lady host an audience weekly at the House of Wind and address issues. real quickly here, how the heck does everybody else get up to the House of Wind?
No, because it says it's a small gathering at the House of Wind. No wonder it's fucking small. They have to climb 10,000 steps, and some people don't want to do that.
And they address these issues personally themselves. If they're dealing with all these tiny little things every single day, I'm exhausted on their behalf just thinking about that workload. Although I will say this example is more to illustrate how compassionate of leaders they are because, Rhys especially is attentive to his people and takes their problems seriously. I still think they need to hire a lot more people to run this government.
I'm going to go off on them on not hiring people later. So yes.
You know what else happens to be on the winter solstice? Feyre's birthday, which, as Rhys points out, quote, "You were born on the longest night of the year. You were meant to be at my side from the beginning. Our girl is turning 21. Woohoo! She can drink now. Oh, wait, we're in a world where they don't have to worry about that." She hopes no one remembers her birthday, though. After all, now that she's immortal, does it really matter? While she's never been one for wanting celebratory attention, there has previously been some self-consciousness with her young age. Even Rhys reflects what the fandom sometimes thinks. Dang, they have quite the age gap. And it can weigh on him because his mother was 18 and his father was 900 when they mated. But the big difference between his parents and his relationship, Feyre chose Rhys. They weren't shoved together like his parents. She picked him. And Rhys still marvels at their happily ever after, even worries that their happiness and love can't last without paying for it, like Nicole had mentioned.
Despite this novella being centered around our core group, we do meet a few new characters, like when Feyre is walking through the rainbow, which is bursting with color one moment and then patches of gray and emptiness the next. Back in ACOFAS, this artist quarter got hit hard during the attack from Hybern on Velaris, which Feyre stormed in to fight for, earning the title of Defender of the Rainbow. As Feyre is standing in this wintry artist quarter looking at the buildings, some boarded up, some half crumbled, a voice starts to speak to her. "Welcome to the chat, Ricinia!" But this is not the first time we are technically meeting her. Back during the attack on Velaris, Feyre noticed a female who was standing outside of her shop with a rusted pipe, fighting off the Hybern attackers. This was Ricinia, who is a fairy we don't really see very often, with pale green skin, a slimmer form, and her eyes vibrant ochre, which, by the way, I didn't know what ochre was, so it's a clay, orangey, reddish color. You're welcome for learning a new color today. I love how Feyre immediately thinks about what it would be like to shapeshift into her eyes. Again, it's just that artist brain constantly at work. But sadly, not all the artists made it out of Hybern that day. An artist, Polina, who owned one of the boarded up studios, died during the attack. But Ricinia is wondering if Feyre would be interested in purchasing Polina's own studio. It completely takes Feyre off guard. A studio, especially one in the artist's quarter, a place that she could barely even go into a few months ago, is not even something that has crossed her mind, let alone something that she would, in her mind, spend that kind of money on.
Not only does Ricinia invite Feyre to her art studio to join her weekly group art session, she also welcomes Feyre into the Rainbow Quarter community as a whole. Our High Lady may feel comfortable being in this part of Velaris, and she helps the community monetarily and through her volunteer work, but she isn't an artist within this community. She prefers to privately paint, and indeed, she hasn't painted since the war almost 5 months ago. That's why I love Ricinia's introduction. She gently lets Feyre know that she is welcome here as one of them, not just as their High Lady, but as a fellow artist. This is the first time Feyre has truly felt this invitation to be part of this community, even if she isn't quite ready for it yet. And all of them are here to paint what needs telling, which hits home for her because she knows that feeling so well.
I love that language around the things that need telling, which AKA the things that Feyre is currently keeping herself too busy that she can't even think about right now.
With Rhys, Feyre will use the excuse that there's too much else to do for the community and it would be selfish to paint. I say excuse because while it is true, like Rhys says, her painting a few hours a day won't change the city's circumstances. She's looking for reasons not to paint, when the true reason is that she's not ready to face what she'll inevitably have to in the aftermath of the war.
This is also not the first time Feyre has mentioned how it feels selfish to paint. Back in ACOTAR, she said to Tamlin that it felt selfish to paint when her family is out there somewhere in the world needing her. And that's when we get the one line from Tamlin that I actually love quoting, and that is, quote, "Don't feel bad for one moment about doing what brings you joy." It's the same thing here. As she will mention, there are so many things that she wants to paint, and if she were to pick one, she's uncertain what's going to emerge. She's not processing what intense trauma she has gone through. And the thought of jumping into that unknown of darkness, it is so raw and so scary for her, let alone to do it around people. She can't even do it privately.
But 2 days after meeting Rosenia, she stands outside her art studio so nervous to go inside and paint with the others. First of all, her nervousness is such a relatable moment for us readers because I don't know about you, but before I'm about to do something new that might seem small, like a workout class, one that I have not done before, it feels big and scary and unknown, which makes me extra self-conscious. But then after a few experiences, after going to the class a few times, it really isn't a big deal at all. While Farah chooses not to paint in the group setting tonight, she does winnow into the boarded up studio down the street that had belonged to Polina.
This is pretty on brand for Feyre. She's always been a little bit more private when it comes to her painting. I won't even say a little bit. She's always been private when it comes to painting. For example, back in the spring court, she had her own painting room that she literally kept locked up so that Tamlin and Lucian wouldn't snoop. She only painted in the cabin in ACOFAS when it was a huge moment of self-discovery, and she was also painting her family's cabin, basically. It felt like they were that close then. It's been a minute since we talked about the eldest Archeron sister and the cruelty that Nesta did show Feyre growing up. There's this part of Nesta's negativity that still lives in Feyre's mind. Back in ACOTAR, Nesta would literally mock Feyre's wish to paint, causing her to think about how flawed the painting is and almost reaching to cover up, like, for instance, the flower on the table. Well, yes, I believe here in front of Rosenia, it is 100% the fear of the unknown of what might emerge on the canvas. But in the past, it was her wanting to keep things private and not wanting to show anyone. It was heavily influenced by how others treated her passion, making it easier for Feyre now to go into this, nope, I need privacy mindset. Especially since the first painting session post-war is going to be so unknown. She has no idea what's going to come up on the canvas. So she perches herself on that rickety stool. And considering what does come out and how private it is, it makes sense for the story that she made this right call of making this a solo session.
Definitely. By herself, surrounded by paint and supplies, Feyre begins to paint. What started as barely being able to hold the paintbrush steady for the first few strokes soon enough turns into an unleashing with, quote, the image in my mind, a dashing vision that I sprinted to keep up with. I love that description. I feel that way about writing sometimes. It's like, I can't get this out fast enough. During our ACOTAR and especially our ACOMAF deep dives, we discussed how painting for Feyre sparks life in her that is vital to her well-being, and it is especially healing for her. It is truer than ever right now because as she creates, she is working on the first stitch to close a wound. It is so fitting that the first image she paints is herself in the Ouroboros.
Not to mention, quote, and in its wake, a sort of quiet followed, as if it were a layer of snow blanketing the earth. I love the snow language because remember, the environment when she looked in the Ouroboros chamber, it was winter, it was snow. So it's just all that callback language. Also, if I'm not mistaken, this is the first time Feyre has ever painted herself. Back in ACOTAR, she painted a lot of scenes, the pool of Starlight, average sex lover extraordinaire Isaac, his hand tangled in her hair, but it was just his hand. It was not her. In ACOMAF, she painted the inner circle in the cabin, but not herself with them. And then ACOWAR, she basically painted pretty spring designs in the spring court. This is the first ever self-portrait of Feyre.
Quote, I had not run from it, and I did not run from it now. This first step is her bravely facing her own inner demons. And with this Ouroboros self-portrait, quote, I had not run from it, and I did not run from it now. This first step is her bravely facing her own inner demons to embrace all of what she sees and accept it no matter the ugliness. After her impactful conversation with the Weaver, Feyre will understand that creating may be therapeutic, yet grief is allowed to be a passenger. And through this grief and trauma, something beautiful can come from it. All right, we need to talk about Feyre's money mindset. As High Lady of the Night Court, she now possesses an unfathomable amount of money that doesn't feel real to her. It's been almost 2 years since she lived in poverty with her family, where all that she hoped for in life was to have enough food and money to survive and the time to paint. Her life now is so much richer, both literally in wealth and also in responsibilities and goals and just with having a family as well. She can dream as big as she wants, and she continues to grapple with what those dreams dreams are. And the fact that some of these dreams cost money make her uncomfortable. It's one thing to donate large sums to a long list of charities or to donate a portion of her monthly salary to rebuilding the rainbow and helping its artists. But it's entirely another to buy herself a studio because that feels too selfish for spending money on, quote, unnecessary dreams. And presents especially feel like a strange concept when the scarcity financial mindset is so ingrained in her. This mindset has come up throughout the series, though it's most prominent in Frost and Starlight, beginning with Feyre looking through the court budget to try and figure out how they find the funds to hire personal secretaries for her and Rhys. Spoiler alert, the money is all there. They can absolutely afford this, and it wouldn't put a dent in their funds. Rhys doesn't even really follow the budget, which good for him.
Unsurprising. It is unsurprising.
But it's instinctual for her to keep track of it and stay within the budget.
It is so true to Feyre that the one time she thinks of spending money on herself, it is for something so incredibly practical, like hiring a personal assistant. And even when she does think about it, she looks at the budgets and see how she looks at what do we need to move around so she can justify spending the money. She is the most unfrivolous spender in the world versus her mate who is just like, the money's there, let's buy it. Later in this book, her and Elaine are going to go shopping for solstice presents. And Elaine points out how she notices it's difficult for Feyre to buy these presents because it feels excessive for Feyre. And I guess it's safe to say that gift giving is not Feyre's love language, unlike Amren.
I think it's physical touch.
Oh, it is 100%. Both her and Rhys are physical touch. Absolutely.
This is also words of affirmation.
I'll also throw out hers might be acts of service. I think she's definitely an acts of service.
Yes.
That would be a fun category thing to do is categorize everyone because I'm a little stumped on Nesta. Anyway, Feyre thinks about how there are so many in the city who have next to nothing, and every moment Feyre spends frivolously shopping, it's like nails on a chalkboard to her. When she was poor, her and her sisters resented the rich who would not step in to help. And now she feels like she'll become just that if she does not spend every waking moment helping. Elaine and Nesta had much more time in their own upbringing to get used to the massive amounts of wealth that they had. And Feyre was still very young when they fell into poverty. And she also quickly became the manager of all of their finances because, as she noted in ACOTAR, if her sisters got their hands on any money, they would instantly spend it.
Or like several summers ago, Elaine bought her sister paint, and while she never would have purchased it for herself, she loved and cherished it dearly, which she'll feel the same with the gifts she receives here in Frost and Starlight.
So Feyre has always felt this intense frugality and only purchasing what is absolutely necessary. And even then, it has to be necessary for survival because she still doesn't have a damn secretary and she doesn't even deem it necessary enough. Anyway.
Well, real quickly, I don't even think that they still get one ever because we hear nothing about it in Silver Flames. I know that they're just side characters, but come on.
Please.
Where's their secretaries?
That's when it's like, we need to have an intervention. You guys need to, oh my goodness.
They need Hayden to give them an intervention.
Oh, that hit me so close to home. Elaine brings into a different perspective, though, saying how gifts are the Valaris tradition, one so precious to them that they literally went to war for it. Quote, perhaps that's the better way to think of it, rather than feeling guilty, to remember that this day means something to them, all of them, regardless of who has more, who has less, and in celebrating the traditions, even through the presents, we honor those who fought for its very existence and the peace the city now has. Damn, Elaine is so much wiser than people give her credit for. It's almost like when you don't coddle her, she's actually super intelligent. Wow.
Now, I will give Feyre this. It is silly that she gets a monthly salary as High Lady. I went down a rabbit hole. There's not much of a rabbit hole, but I found one because isn't she technically paying herself from her own money? Or are their salaries funded from the Night Court's incoming wealth? We know that there are taxes on city dwellers and Valaris is prosperous with its trade, as you have mentioned, but the math isn't mathing.
Is it almost like compound interest? That's like what they're paying their, I don't know. I literally was like, should we call our CPA? Like, would this be considered an owner's draw? Like, what is this?
Well, because obviously the Night Court has always been very wealthy, but how is Rhys bringing that much money in so he isn't just draining the court's wealth by giving the Inner Circle ridiculous salaries? Like, these are the political nuances I want to know. Last thing I do want to mention about Farrah's money mindset is I have seen some arguments in the fandom that she actually does not mind spending money whatsoever. Remember how she does like to be in the jewels and she likes to be pretty and you know, with the beautiful crowns and the dresses and things like that. To counter that, I will say that it's not that they are spending money. It is money that has already been spent, or that it's a family heirloom or something like that. So there's a difference between, you know, picking out a beautiful crown that is in Rhys's family's secret trove versus going out and spending money on her own. That's the big difference there that I wanted to address.
Fae-vorite doesn't really talk with Rhys about her money mindset very often, which is a quite big shame because they could use something like Paired. We all have seasons of life where we wish we could find new ways to deeply connect with our partner. Well, Paired is here to help us do just that. It is an app for couples who want to strengthen their relationship. It was founded on the simplest belief that real, lasting love is a daily practice. All of Paired's content is backed by experts and relationship therapists, and it's proven to work.
Here's how it works. You and your partner download the Pair app together, and every day, Paired gives you personalized questions, quizzes, and games to stay connected, deepen your conversations, and have fun too. When you sign up for Paired Premium, only one partner needs to pay for a subscription, 2 for the price of 1. The best part is that you can't see your partner's answer until you answer yourself. So it's a safe space to have an open and honest conversation about your relationship. No faking it, no pretending, just genuine connection, which is something we all really do need in these busy lives of ours.
So fun fact, Brett and I have actually been Paired users for years. We consistently would answer the question every single day. It would spark a bunch of new conversation. And it's just been a daily ritual for us that has been years in the making. And it really does just take a moment. There's no distractions. It is just the two of us being able to connect on such a deeper level. Sometimes the questions are really fun and it gets us thinking about new possibilities. Sometimes they're really deep and meaningful and it gets us learning new things about each other. It can help you learn how to better communicate, open up more, argue less. Actually, I can confirm we have argued less since we started using Paired, and discuss difficult topics like your financial situation. Like Fae-vorite and Rhys need to download Paired. Oh my God. Or starting a family. Fae-vorite and Rhys need to download Paired.
Whether you're just a few dates in or have been together for a long time, find the time to connect with your partner and nourish your relationship. It is so important. With the Paired app, it is easy and fun, and it only takes 5 minutes a day. We have an exclusive deal for our listeners. Huzzah! Get 50% off a subscription by going to paired.com/FFG50. Again, get 50% off if you sign up for a subscription by using our link at paired.com/FFG50 to sign up today.
No holiday special is complete without a little Nightmare Before Christmas, aka a visit to the Hewn City. Apparently, every year, Mor, Rhys, and now Feyre have a tradition around solstice to make a happy holidays visit to the Court of Nightmares. Is it entirely political and just to be on good grounds, or at least as good as we can be with the Hewn City? Yeah, of course. But as Rhys notes, they were also invaluable during the war, and they almost got obliterated by Hybern soldiers during one of the, let's drive you as north as possible battles. I do want to point out, however, that this is extremely different from next year's celebration, which will have dancing featuring our own dancing queen, Nesta.
That is a good point. Now, this year, our crew does interrupt the Hewn City's festivities, and Feyre demands everyone but Kier and Eris leave. So maybe they just have a reason to join in the festivities next year and play nice.
I love how Feyre's like, everyone, get out! Damn, girl. However, we cannot just call this night court tradition because thanks to Asriel's spying, Eris is supposed to make a visit to apparently his new, BFF Kier tonight. So the Inner Circle wants to drop in and see why the hell Eris is cozying up to Kier. Do we know how Asriel learned about this? know. And more, quite frankly, doesn't want to know. But I do. I want to know how Asriel figured this out.
I can't wait to learn more about Asriel's spy mastery skills. We don't really have any specifics yet, except that he has trustworthy spies everywhere that report to him. So I'm assuming that he has someone close to Eris, and we can bet he has tons of spies within the Hewn City.
This does beg the question, why is Eris making a trip to the Hewn City? Because we all know his reasoning of like, I just wanted to extend solstice greetings is utter bullshit. Is he looking to, find his own Lady of Autumn for when he does take the throne? I personally do not think so, because why on earth would he go to Kier after the disaster that was last time?
I don't think Kier would have anyone to offer him either.
My guess is just like because he's the leader of the Hewn City, he like Kier is kind of, I'm going to call him like the Yenta, the matchmaker of the
But he would but Eris being a future High Lord would need somebody very powerful.
That's a great point.
Yes.
So I think we can cross that off the list. Is Eris bonding with another person who feels trapped under a High Lord's rule? Considering his plans for his own father's murder, I'm personally hoping he's not conspiring with Kier, because that could entail that Kier is wanting to, discuss Rhys's own murder. And I don't think Eris is that stupid.
I think Eris might be trying to manipulate Kier with this camaraderie. I don't think he actually likes Kier, because he was so disgusted with what Kier did to Mor 500 years ago. This could be one more way that Eris is playing chess by pretending to cozy up with Kier when really he is manipulating him.
Well, so as Rhys will note later, Kier does want to build ties with the Autumn Court. But at least if Kier and Eris are scheming something up together, Rhys is like, well, at least they know we're now watching them, so they're not going to be stupid. I think you're right on the money. I think that this is Eris being manipulating and playing chess. And honestly, I kind of love it. I want Eris to be some kind of like master manipulator and like super, super smart. I think that would be so fun. Or I'm just going to throw out another idea is, did Eris come here because he knew Asriel and Rhys would catch wind of him coming and come to the Hewn City? Plus, Eris can't just really go to Velaris, because that looks like he's way too in league with Rhys. But if he came to the Hewn City, Asriel told Rhys, Rhys comes to the Hewn City to talk to him, he would be able to tell Rhys, hey, my father's wanting to extend his borders. Like he would basically be able to give him this heads up that he does give him, and also tell him that Timmy Tam's not doing shit about it. This is the one I'm going to go with.
I really like that thinking. Now, I am under the impression this is not his only visit, but in Silver Flames, Eris and the Inner Circle will meet outside the Hewn City for matters that they don't want Kier to know about. That's another reason why I don't think he's truly in league and cozying up with Kier. While Mor regularly rules over the Hewn City in Rhys's absence, this visit hits different because, of course, Eris is here. She's anxious to see for herself how cozy her father and Eris have become, but facing Eris is extremely difficult for her, no matter how much time has passed. She hates how much he still affects her 500 years later, and with the two males she hates most in the same room, it's almost more than she can take. Strong and courageous Mor's kryptonite is Eris. She's always hated him since the moment she met him, which is important to note with a lot of the theories swirling around about their history. I think it's safe to say that they were not in on anything together, based on how much she is emotionally triggered by him and how much she sees in his presence, thinking that she's hated his distance and coldness since they first met. So I know that there are some theories that say that they're actually in leagues with each other, and I think that this is proof here that they definitely are not. But there is more to the story. We absolutely believe that. When we are in the Hewn City, everyone in the Inner Circle takes on a different persona, but perhaps no one as much as Mor. She is a completely different person, right down to the voice she uses. Mor is usually a bright and fierce light. She doesn't let her father dim her or touch her light, but she also doesn't give him the chance by seeing it in the first place. Mor thinks for herself how Thera has fallen into the role of mistress of this horrible city a lot easier than she did, which makes sense. The Court of Nightmares brings out Thera's Slytherin. Yes, it's a mask, but it's her showing a different side of herself, as we've talked about at length. Now, may I just say how much I love getting Mor's POV in this novella. We get quite a few glimpses into who she is in her life that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise. Like, for instance, we get a detailed and extensive flashback of the day more than 500 years ago when she was dumped in the Autumn Court woods and Eris found her. For the first time, we are truly in her perspective with the pain physically and emotionally that she had to go through that traumatic day. We're in her head feeling the hate she felt for her family and the torture they put her through with hammering 3 long and brutal nails into her, and the hate she felt for Eris, quote, she would rather die here, bleed out here, instead of live in the Autumn Court with him.
Eris said that day, quote, "No one touches her. The moment we do, she's our responsibility." Yes, this is said with malice and evil. And I am of the firm belief that he is saving her. And in his mind, he knows he's saving her here.
Yes, absolutely.
He knows how badly she does not want to live in the Autumn Court with him. But also, I do wonder, because after he leaves, did he go and tell Asriel to come get more? I don't think so, because why would Asriel, not tell her that, hey, Eris contacted me and he said, come get more? But I wonder why would Asriel have taken because it was a few hours after Eris left. And if Asriel had heard, he would have zoomed as fast as possible to come get more.
That's so interesting, because I am convinced it was Eris who anonymously contacted Az. He sent,
okay, anonymously is a different story.
Well, because remember, he sent word to Tamlin when Lucian was on the run, but Tamlin never knew it was Eris. So he has some method. Remember, we talked about this in episode 9. I forgot. Maybe he didn't send word until he was back at the forest house. The time between Eris finding more and Az coming does throw a little bit of a wrench into this theory, but I don't know. There's reasons it could be that still make this anonymous contact possible. Again, we talked a lot about this flashback and the theories around Eris, Mor, and Asriel in our ACOWAR episode 9. Go check that out for the full coverage.
Because apparently I also forgot it.
From this Hewn City meeting, we get several mentions of Mor's gift. Here I am talking about her gift again. I still don't know what it means, bottom line. This line from her flashback stood out to me. Quote, her gift had left her here, broken and bleeding. I assume she is referring to her gift of truth and how much more powerful she is in her bloodline, how that made her a prized marriage alliance, and that's why she ended up here in the woods mutilated. Is she referring to something else about her gift? Where is all this power, Mor? Is it, I don't want to say just the power of truth, but is it more? It should be more for Mor.
I think you're right. I think it's the fact that she is so powerful is why she was such a prized marriage alliance. And that is why she ended up here. It's like the chain of events, the dominoes have fallen, and that's why she's here.
I still have not seen this full power of hers, but whatever.
No one has.
And then at the end,
I have thoughts. And I have thoughts on it later.
And then at the end of chapter 6, she thinks to herself, quote, truth is your gift. Truth is your curse. Say something. Would she tell her father a truth that could strike him down? Like, what was her saying something be this powerful truth that nobody else would be able to say? Bottom line, even being in her POV, we still get no real insight into what her power of truth means, and it really bothers me.
We know we're getting one more novella. There's speculation that there's going to be the full-length books, and those are going to be more of like the Archeron sisters stories. And then the novella is going to be more. Do you think that novella is going to be more, or do you think Mor is going to get a full story?
I think Mor would be in a novella, yes.
I think that there's too many other backstories. Well, I don't know. I know because I say that, and she's got a lot of backstory situations. I do think it's going to be a novella. I'm kind of hoping it's a novella. I don't know if I would want a full story of Mor, but I also wouldn't have wanted a full story of Nesta, and then we got Silver Flames, and it was wonderful. So
I think about the level of depth, and this is not against Mor, but when you look at these POV chapters that we're getting, we get so much more depth from Cassian, and I'll even say Nesta, even when it's just a few pages with her, than we do with Mor. We do, of course, get this here in the Hewn City. We get this flashback, yet we don't, like, it's almost like she still feels a little bit like a surface level character. She is more two-dimensional when other characters are more three-dimensional.
Since the war, and more specifically, since Rhys went behind Mor's back with Kier and Eris back in ACOWAR, the wounds between these two cousins have not really fully healed. So later in Frost and Starlight, when they're headed on a walk, Rhys offers a proposition to his cousin, where we learn, number one, Kier will be coming to Valaris soon, and it's up to Mor to decide whether or not she wants to be here, which she has conflicting feelings about, naturally. She doesn't want to be seen as a coward and, have her father have all like the smugness that he won and, whatever, because she retreated. But at the same time, seeing her father in her city has become It's like an unbearable thought considering what a safe haven it is for her. Even with Kier and co roaming through the city, there are the same promises from ACOFAS that Rhys has held on to. Every business owner, restaurant owner, shop, everything will not serve anyone from the Hewn City. They will not be able to procure lodgings. They will also not be able to see any of the performances. Basically, anything that makes Velaris, they will not be able to do, and they will not be welcome here. Plus, as we learn here from Rhys, Cassian and Asriel will be monitoring them like crazy. So they'll have these two like Illyrian warriors standing over their shoulders the entire time. The second thing we learn from this convo is that Rhys is needing to send his third away in about a month or so. While Asriel can infiltrate the other courts and territories and learn information through his spies and all that kind of stuff, Rhys needs a charming third to go and win over these other territories because treaty negotiations are dragging on for so long that Moore basically says that they're not happening at all. He wants her to visit these territories and kingdoms here and there just casually and make them realize that, if they enter the human lands, if they, step out of line, that the Night Court will obliterate them as soon as possible. Cool. As Rhys notes, this is not a mission to get her out of the city so that when Kier does come, she's not here. This is entirely because her talents are needed elsewhere. And I love that there's that line. He's like, no, like this is absolutely not related in the slightest. And it even says, and I meant every word of it because we're in Rhys's POV. So honestly, in my opinion, a very out of place chapter, but it is a great setup for where the hell Moore is during Silver Flames because she is often not around.
Exactly. And that's even 9 months later. So this is quite the mission for her. Rhys is a leader who knows when and how to best utilize his inner circle skills to their best advantage. And right now, like you were saying, Moore is needed beyond the Night Court. He can trust her to negotiate on the Night Court's behalf, forge alliances because she is so charming. And she's also kind of scary, so she can still keep them all on their toes. Like, perfect for her.
And I also just want to do a quick wing watch for this conversation with Moore. Even though Rhys is not wearing his wings, to protect them from the cold, but the symbolism is still there. He is in High Lord mode with Moore, talking to his third about Kier coming to the city and about a mission for her. He is not in family mode.
As Eris informed Rhys during their Hewn City meeting, Baron is potentially starting to cross into the human lands. He's at least very, very interested in doing so. He is forbidden to, but as Eris says, it's not the Night Court's call to make. If Baron wants to expand his territory, and with the Spring Court in shambles and the wall gone, now is as good a time as any for the High Lord of Autumn to seize his opportunity. Because it is only the Spring Court that borders the human lands. A lot of this border patrol responsibility falls on Tamlin. If anyone wants to expand their territory, they will have to go through the Spring Court, either with permission or by force. With this news, Rhys knows he has to do something about it, or at least check in with Tamlin. So he goes to visit Tamlin at his manor. Upon his arrival, Rhys immediately notices that this Spring Court land is not the same as it was even barely a year ago. On the estate, nothing blooms at all, and this area where Tamlin lives is lifeless. The magic of the land, it's like it's not working. It is not creating new bountiful life the way it is supposed to. This immediately made me think of Calamai because the reason for the big Fae orgy is supposed to be to produce magic into the land, and it's all part of the circle of life. The last Calamai was when Lucian had to step in for Tamlin, which he performed with Ianthe. So even though this in and of itself is a head scratcher because it's supposed to be the High Lord of Spring, Farah was in the Spring Court after this event. So about 6 months ago or so now. And all of this was still magically full of life. So the only explanation is that this is directly tied to Tamlin in his current state. He has lost his will to live, and therefore so has everything else around him. Yes, the lack of servants to upkeep certainly contributes to the dry fountains, the tangled webs of thorns, the untrimmed hedges and such, but nothing is blooming, and that is the big telltale sign that the magic is dried up here. It's like life has been sucked out of this place, and I think that magic plays a role in that because it is so intertwined with its High Lord. And to note, there is still spring magic and life outside of the manor, but it's way off in the distance, away from its High Lord, who is like a disease to this area. Not only is there lack of life here at the manor, there are obvious signs of Tamlin's temper to the point that every room fell victim to his destruction. Shredded furniture, paintings, cracked walls, gouged claw-marked doors. This whole manor reflects darkness and isolation and despair. Certainly there's no sign of solstice. So it's no surprise that when Tamlin himself answers the door, because again, there is no one else here, he is haggard. He is a shell of himself. Rhys may easily smirk, but dang, this is an easy mark. It's not lost on Rhys either that Tamlin takes him to the one room in the manor that wasn't completely destroyed.
Rhys had asked Fae-vorite if she wanted to join him on this checkup, to which he almost immediately knew her answer would be no. And he seems almost relieved at her decline to come here, feeling like maybe he doesn't want anyone to witness what's about to be said or done. All of which he will share with Fae-vorite after the fact, but there's a big difference between getting the update versus being here live. Yes, Tamlin did save her mate's life on the hill at the end of ACOFAS, albeit rather reluctantly in my opinion, but that's neither here nor there. And yes, Fae-vorite did send him that note at the end of the book saying, quote, "I hope you find happiness." But Fae-vorite has no wish to see any part of that journey of happiness for him. The chapter of her life with Tamlin is closed. So closed to the point that she doesn't know if she wants to speak, deal, or even think about him perhaps ever again. Tamlin, for her, is so unpredictable. He's a loose cannon, and she has the option not to subject herself to that uncertainty that might come from this. And without getting, quite frankly, too personal, I get this. I closed the chapter on my abuser tenfold, and I actually did have a conversation with him, and it was our own version of "I hope you find happiness," just far away from me. Was it the hardest closure and conversation of my life? Yes. And I know that if I were in a situation where I had the option to see him again, I would decline for the very same reason as Fae-vorite does here. And quite frankly, I know that if Brett were to run into him, I think he would have a very similar reaction as Rhys does here, which let's talk about Rhys and Tamlin. First up, I want to call out the elephant in the book. This is a stark difference between the Tamlin that we saw in the last part of ACOFAS. Was Tamlin alone and bitter at the end of ACOFAS? Yes. But now we see a Fae male who is utterly broken. The manor in such disarray that Rhys notes it looked better the day that Amarantha's cronies trashed it. Well, Rhys would know he was there trashing it with them. I'm probably going to be in the minority here. I don't feel bad for Tamlin at all. There is a difference between being in rock bottom, which he most definitely is, and letting your anger get the best of you to the point where you destroy a whole house except for one room. But let's take a moment to put some of the pieces together, or at least speculate, because we don't really know a whole lot about what happened between at the last book and what led him to this state. We know that he had a small force at the end of ACOFAS. We can assume that they abandoned him because of, how he's acting in this book, because Rhys does bring up the fact that, "Hey, Tamlin, why are you not enforcing your borders?" And Tamlin says, quote, "Do you see any sentries around to do it?" We do know that Lucien came to see him and that they could talk, and that Lucien returned to Velaris with a black eye. But we know that Lucien has also come back to visit him and is currently hunting for their dinner, since there are no servants or anyone in the house to hunt, buy, or make food for the High Lord. As Rhys guesses, Lucien is not here out of any kindness, but more so out of pity for Tamlin. And sadly, because of Rhys's visit here, this will be the last time Lucien gets to be in the Spring Court, at least for our tale, because Tamlin, in his anger, will kick out Lucien and dump all of his stuff on the doorstep of his apartment in Velaris, choosing, again, to be even more alone. I do wonder how much of this is wallowing in his own self-pity versus like Nesta, who is also shoving everyone away, believing that she deserves no one and nothing. Later, Tamlin will ask Rhys if he deserves Fae-vorite's forgiveness. And again, I want to go back to the fact that at the end of ACOFAS, Tamlin heard her side of the story. And I wonder if it made him look at his own choices. And instead of, hearing what he did to her and, that causing him to change, instead he just lays down and wallows in his self-pity, believing that this is what he deserves. Again, it's a lot like Nesta.
Yeah, that right there. Tamlin is in a deep depression. Yes, he brought it upon himself, just like Nesta did.
Yes.
But this is where we can agree to disagree. I feel sorry for him and his character here because he does not have a support team like Nesta, even when she frequently verbally lashed out at them. And we have Rhys kicking a male while he's down and really just gloating. He is rubbing in Tamlin's face that he's happy while Tamlin is very clearly broken and depressed because Rhys got his happily ever after. This does not excuse Tamlin's actions. Again, he brought it upon himself. And yet, I will stand by that he is not an evil person. I honestly give Rhys a lowercase L in this scene for how he treats someone who is obviously depressed and has absolutely nothing, no one, no hope, and especially no will to live.
I will agree with you on a lowercase L for Rhys. And how long has Rhys been feeling these feelings? He felt every single ounce of what Feyre received from Tamlin. And Feyre never got to have this conversation where she lashed out on her ex for treating her the way that he did. And Rhys is like, I finally get to have this moment because there's a mic in this room, and Rhys is like, I'm taking it because you're clearly not. So yes, I do agree on the lowercase L. And I do also counterpoint, Tamlin did have a support system, and he literally kicked him out with a black eye and then dumped his shit on his own apartment in Valaris.
If we're talking about Lucien, then that was Feyre's fault.
Oh, that's true.
Yes.
So,
now, again, it's never so black and white.
No, it's not.
However, in the situation, nobody stuck by Tamlin because nobody wanted to, while Nesta has people, again, like she's not like literally lashing out at them and destroying a house, but she is burning every possible bridge she can very intentionally with her words. And people are still standing up for her and sticking up for her, and people are still supporting her despite all of that.
I do agree on that. It does not give me any pity for Tamlin, but I do agree with you that it is a very similar situation that Nesta is in.
Yes, I do pity Tamlin in this.
That's great. You're allowed to pity him. I'm not saying you're wrong for pitying him, and there's many people in the fandom who do pity him. I'm just saying that I don't.
That's fine. Agree to disagree again. Yes.
So Lexi, it's almost like you could say that Rhys is being unnecessarily salty, but you know what else is salty? LMNT.
LMNT, that was a great transition there, Nicole.
Yeah, I hated that was good.
LMNT is an electrolyte solution that has enough sodium, potassium, and magnesium to get you feeling and performing your best. Clearly, Tamlin is not taking LMNT right now. Seriously, though, I use LMNT every single day, and I absolutely love it. It has both a sweet and salty taste to it, so it feels like I'm indulging in a treat, but I'm also keeping myself hydrated.
Fun fact, this past weekend, or at least when we're recording, I did like a dry land triathlon situation thing. The first thing I did when we were done is I cracked open a sparkling LMNT, and it was so good. Like, it revived me. LMNT has 0 sugar, artificial flavors, other dodgy ingredients to hold you back, yet it is still packed with flavor. I absolutely love the amount of flavors that there are to choose from when it comes to LMNT. Some of my favorites are watermelon salt, which is the sparkling that I had this past weekend. Raspberry salt, orange salt, mango chili is my go-to. I love mango chili for so many reasons, but there's so many to choose from. I still haven't tried all of the LMNT flavors.
LMNT came up with a fantastic offer for our listeners. Get your free sample pack with any LMNT purchase at drinklmnt.com/FFG. Be sure to try the new LMNT Sparkling like Nicole was just mentioning. It's a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling electrolyte water that is perfect for on the go or if you just finished your triathlon.
Let's pivot our attention to the lowercase L receiver, Rhys. Starting off with a quick wing watch. Rhys is wearing his normal black jacket, nothing Illyrian to be seen, including no wings. This game of High Lord of Night might be over from, they're like coming out in ACOFAS War, but it is still Rhys in this dynamic with Tamlin. And like we've mentioned, he's being very smug in this scene. And like I mentioned earlier, in Rhys's POV, I do kind of get it. Tamlin believes from the beginning that Rhys is just here to gloat about everything. Rhys led the winning of the war. He got the girl. His territory is doing pretty dang well. And while he doesn't outright say, nah, I got Feyre and you didn't, Rhys stirs the pot hardcore. He has something that has always been extremely easy for him to do with Tamlin. He refers to Feyre as my mate, knowing that the words would find their mark, hitting Tamlin right in the chest.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just found this unnecessary of Rhys. Like, I gotta side with Lucien here. That was so not cool of him, no matter his feelings about Tamlin. That's all I'm gonna say.
Oh, I don't disagree. I do not disagree that it was unnecessary. And this is Rhys, like I'll talk about in a second. He is normally the bigger male in the room. He was not in this scene, and he knows that about himself. But that's the difference. He's able to say, I was not the bigger male today, and that was not great.
And Feyre will be like, oh, it's okay, honey. We all have bad days. Well,
I have feelings about that.
What the result of that is going to be? Lucien is really going to get kicked out of that whole area. Again, he's the collateral damage. And have feelings
but
about
Rhys and
that.
Feyre have always been like that.
Yes.
They've always been like here's this worst, the Suriel, when Feyre went to go see the Suriel last book, and Rhys is like, just leave a note next time, and Moore's like, fuck no!
Yes,
are you kidding me? They've always been like that with each
it's
other.
like the two of them.
Yep. When Tamlin says, quote, I have no illusions that the day you thank me for anything, Rhysand, is the day the burning fires of hell go cold. And Rhys taunts him with the answer of poetic. Which, by the way, I do love this little callback to when Tamlin wrote Feyre poetry back in book 1. Even in the digs, there's just these cool little literary callbacks, and I do really like that. In this meeting that was supposed to be about peace and safety for Prythian, whoops, Rhys offers up Night Court soldiers to come and protect the borders, since, remember, Baron is wanting to expand his territory, which he doesn't tell Tamlin in this scene. And I think that would have been helpful for him to know. But I'm guessing the reason that Rhys didn't tell Tamlin is because it would have called into question Eris's role and all of that kind of stuff. Although it is another instance of people keeping information from Tamlin, which we have talked about at length. The other reason, he came here and offered up now Night Court borders is because Rhys is saying maintaining peace is important. To which Tamlin replies with, what? Oh my God, this is unforgivable. Quote, what peace? Nothing is different. The wall is gone. That's all. Okay, quick claw watch. This is when Tamlin's claws finally come out. And this is 100% him saying, someone else is trying to rule over my territory. And I hate looking like a weak high lord. That is the claw watch here. It comes as no surprise, though, that Tamlin is basically saying, no, I don't want the Night Court brutes on my land. Which, yeah, I kind of get it. I understand why his thinking is here, because he doesn't trust them not to slit his throat. Although, as Rhys does note later, he doesn't have any wards around his manor, so people could come and slit his throat at any time. And it almost seems like Tamlin wants that to happen.
Which goes right back to the point that he has completely lost his will to live. Yep.
But then that calls into question, why not just offer up Summer Court people from the get-go, which Tamlin does trust. And Rhys will orchestrate later, which is good. But I do think the reason that he offers up Night Court at the beginning is, again, that smugness, that's stirring the pot. Oh, look, I still have soldiers to spare even, and I will give you some. Of course, that impacts Tamlin. However, this, no, I don't want your help, is because he has so given up. This is a pattern for Tamlin. Recall back to ACOTAR and ACOMAF when we dissected Tamlin at length. We discussed how Tamlin is a passive leader, always burying his head in the sand and just hoping it'll work out eventually. And he only takes action if absolutely necessary, but he does take action always in a reactive way. See, sending Feyre back to the human lands in ACOTAR, or him making a deal with Hybern in ACOMAF. Him saying nothing is different except we just don't have a wall now. It's so on brand versus Rhys, who is thinking ahead, seeing every possible scenario and trying to protect against it, albeit not very well in the scene. This causes Rhys to finally lose his shit on Tamlin, something we don't really ever see Rhys do. Remember back in the High Lords meeting, he was very calm, cool, and collected. But he is itching to get all of this anger off of his chest for this dude who's just being passive, ranging from you brought every bit of this upon yourself and you deserve this pitiful existence, to you nearly destroyed Feyre, to my personal favorite, quote, she survived it though, survived you, and you still felt the need to humiliate her, belittle her. If you meant to win her back, old friend, that wasn't the wisest route. Listen, is Rhys deserving of an L? Yes. Still get it. Defend your woman! I love it. Did he kick a male when he was down? Yes. Did he later say to Feyre that he should have been the bigger male? Yes. Was it necessary? No. I'm glad he finally said it. Was the timing right? No, not at all.
No, it was not. I understand what you mean by he needs to get this out. He needs his closure. And I don't want to even say closure, because I don't think that there is such a thing as closure for this with Rhys, but he's so depressed.
I know.
He's so broken. He has completely lost the will to live. He wants to die. He feels like that is what he deserves. And here is someone coming in who literally is so happy, who got everything that he ever wanted, and is like, yes, you do deserve all of that.
I agree that the timing isn't good. And let's talk about Tamlin being broken, because, quote, a broken male, broken from his own actions, his own choices. It was not my concern. He did not deserve my pity. But as I winnowed away the dark rippling wind around me, a strange sort of hollowness took root in my stomach. I'm not saying that Rhys getting all of this off his chest is like, all right, and we're done. I am saying that someone needed to tell this to Tamlin, that he fucked up so royally.
He knows that.
I don't think he does. I do not think he does to the level, because I do think that he's now thinking of like, I deserve, like he's more like wallowing in his own self-pity versus realizing you did this to another person and look what you did.
Yes, we'll talk about next episode how he does ask like if he deserves her forgiveness. And I think it is dawning on him what he has done. He thinks that he deserves all of this. Again, that goes back to Nesta. The same thing as Nesta. Nesta thinks that she deserves all of this, and so she just continues fueling it. Exact same thing here with Tamlin.
I do think, though, that the question of do I deserve her forgiveness, it was prompted by some of the things that Rhys is saying here.
Yes, absolutely.
So to wrap this up nicely with a little bow, Rhys does later come back in this book, and we will talk about that next episode, and metaphorically hold out an olive branch to Tamlin because of this hollowness in his stomach that he is feeling. Just because you're able to get something off your chest doesn't mean like, okay, I'm done. Like, Rhys feels guilty, and honestly, he should. He does deserve a lowercase L for this, like we said. But at the end of the day, he sees his old friend in Tamlin. And while he does not want to repair that relationship with him, much like Feyre doesn't want to, he does want Tamlin to find some form of peace, which we will get to next episode.
Let's turn our full attention to foreshadowing important moments in the rest of this book, and especially in Silver Flames.
All of the mentions of how no one wants to live up at the House of Wind. It is just like they did not hold back on the amount of mentions of this. It's perfectly setting us up for the punishment that will be Nesta being sent to live there. Speaking of houses.
Wait, I am going to have an issue with the word punishment there.
Oh, I agree. It's not punishment, but she views it as
absolutely.
It as punishment.
Yes.
That's what I mean.
Her perspective there. It's those damn 10,000 steps, you know?
I will say it's the damn 10,000 steps, and the way, because I read this part this morning of Silver Flames, the way they presented it, it feels like a punishment. We know it's not, but it feels like a punishment. Speaking of houses, man, the townhouse feels small and cramped. Did you know that, Lexi? It's setting us up for purchasing the plot of land that is much bigger, much more spacious, and perfect for a river house.
Feyre is thinking to herself how there is more she can do to help the community in the aftermath of the war, but she just doesn't know what yet. Stay tuned for our next episode, Feyre darling. Rhys and Cassian argue again with Lord Devlin in Windhaven about allowing the females time to train. Rhys notes that change here in Illyria is slower than the melting glaciers in the mountains, with unchallenged traditions going back thousands of years. Quote, until us, until now. They are trying to take baby steps towards equality among the Illyrians, but it's such an uphill battle with these males set in their ways and their superiority.
Later, Rhys will note to Cassian and Azriel that Devlin, while definitely unhappy, he still drew up a schedule for the girls to train. Sadly, I don't think this really lasts because we don't see this very much in Silver Flames.
In fact, I think there's even a line about how Cassian had been trying. It was past tense, and that's why he gets so excited with the Valkyries and all of that. Rhys thinks to himself that he'll have to find a way to fix what's happening with Nesta because he can see how it's eating away at his mate. Oh goodness. Yes, he and the others will find a way to fix it. We learn quite a bit from Cassian's POV about Ramiel and the Bloodright qualifiers, which I know we didn't get into today because we are going to go into all the details about Ramiel and the Bloodright and all of that in Silver Flames. Although I'm just itching to dive into everything about Ramiel. It was so hard not to go into every morsel of it in today's episode. There's just so much set up for Silver Flames in this novella.
Especially the line from Rhys, quote, Nesta she's Illyrian, and I mean that as a compliment. She'd rather be a Valkyrie, Rhys. Feyre does tell Rhys that he will have to forgive Nesta for her lack of aid to her younger sister while they were growing up. And Rhys does finally, I won't say forgiveness, but he does make peace with Nesta, although it literally does take her bringing both Feyre and Nyx back to life in order to make that happen. Versus Elaine just exists, and he's like, I forgive you. Period.
I do have to say, Rhys says, quote, I cannot forgive anyone who made you suffer. I know he had his reasons and he was ultimately helping her, but he could fall into that making her suffer category from under the mountain. I'm just saying.
Nope, I think you're right.
We meet Emery. Don't worry, we did not forget this chapter here. Cassian immediately notices that her wings were clipped, which we'll learn the full tragic tale in Silver Flames. Cassian even knew her father Proteus and seems surprised and definitely mad to notice her clipped wings, understanding that it was likely her father who did that to her. We'll find out from Emery that everyone thought her father was wonderful because he was so charming and smart. And while Cassian doesn't say he liked her father, we don't get the impression of how terrible he was, except for Cassian's observation here with Emery's wings. Cassian also remembers that her father did not have any sons and no close male relatives, though with his death, the store should have gone to one of them. However, Emery has taken ownership of the shop after her father died in the war. In Silver Flames, Bellius, Emery's cousin, gives her a difficult time trying to demand that the store should be his father's, Proteus's brother. I also love how Cassian compares Emery several times to Nesta. The way Emery holds his stare, the way she keeps her back straight and chin upraised, which is Nesta's quote, "I will slay my enemies" pose. I love the little detail of how Cassian has names for her poses, especially all of our favorites, including Cassian's. Quote, "I don't want Cassian to know I'm reading smut face." I mean,
everyone knows that face,
yes,
by
exactly.
the way. Everyone knows that face.
I think SJM put that in there just to be like a hee hee hee.
Oh, yes.
I mean, we even get the line about the fire in Emery's words. Quote, "He'd seen that fire before, and the steel. He half wondered what might happen if the two of them ever met. What might come of it."
There's even this line about Emery putting a line in the sand, which is exactly what Nesta does during the blood rite to protect her sisters while they climb the mountain and while Nesta defends them. Plus, there's that foreshadowing for Emery's future as a Valkyrie.
I don't even care if the foreshadowing is super obvious. I love this chapter where we're first introduced to Emery from Cassian's POV, and they bond over no one else around here liking them.
Like, especially since Emery will become one half of Nesta's chosen family, it makes so much sense that if we can't get introduced to her through Nesta's POV in this book, that it would be through Cassian's POV. Like, it just, it's so good. When Feyre visits Nesta in the Wolf's Den, Nesta mentions how she came here just to listen to the musicians play. Now, while she does say this sharply, it's Nesta after all, she is telling the truth. Nesta loves the music, and one of the reasons she goes here so much is to hear them play. It is also called the Wolf's Den, which Nesta repeatedly refers to herself as a wolf in ACOFAS, or Silver Flames, much like Feyre did when she was at the Weaver's cottage calling herself a wolf.
A few other moments from the scene, which again, we are going to be getting a lot more into Nesta next episode. When seeing her sister in the Wolf's Den, Feyre also thinks of a painting, quote, "A queen without a throne." More queen language that we gotta point out is everywhere in the series in reference to Nesta. Feyre also speculates that her sister is still as death, then immediately wonders if that was her power from the Cauldron. Again, a lot of foreshadowing about Nesta's power of death. While we will spend a lot of time discussing this theme next episode, I'm still going to point out the foreshadowing we get about Feyre thinking about children in the first half of this novella. Understanding that conceiving is rare among the Fae, Feyre wonders if waiting until she's ready will bite her in the ass, her words. We already know that our girl is a little impatient, and she is still thinking in, I'll call it human time, where months and years feel like forever when it's a blink of an eye for a Fae. That's a huge mindset shift for her and her sisters there. She reflects on still wanting to live life with Rhys before children, and besides, they're too busy to even think about having a child yet. But we can tell that the seed has already planted, pun intended, that they want children, and she feels this tug of urgency, which will come to full fruition next episode when she meets the Valaris Weaver who lost her husband before they could have children. I know the fandom has some thoughts about this, but prepare yourselves because I am going to go to bat for Feyre and her change of mind.
And I'm going to echo what you say because it is all here on the page,
Yep.
like every single instance. Yes. Feyre also calling Rhys an overbearing mother hen. Rhys is already in daddy mode.
Oh.
I mean, we already knew he was in daddy mode, but like now he's in daddy mode. It is time to sip some tea with the Suriel. Every episode, Lexi is going to sit down with the Suriel, RIP, and walk through a world-building topic to help us better understand the world and the people in it.
Today's Suriel topic is the current political landscape after winning the war in ACOWAR. ACOWAR ended with the Cauldron secretly going to Kretea, and the Fae and humans started the process of renegotiating the treaty now that there is no wall. The truth is, this peace after their victory against Hybern is tenuous. Treaty negotiations are not really happening at all because too many tentative allies to the Night Court who seem to be spearheading this treaty negotiation claim they're too busy with rebuilding and prefer to reconvene in the spring to discuss new terms. With the wall gone, there is concern, however, that Fae territories both on the continent and here in Prythian, Autumn Court, might try to take the unprotected human lands for themselves. Which, yes, that is a huge concern. They are going to try to take advantage of no wall and see what they can get away with. This is why it's such a problem that Tamlin is not enforcing his border with the human realm. He doesn't have the resources or the willpower, so Rhys is trying to help in order to prevent other courts, like Baron, from causing problems and trying to take more territory for himself. Then we have Hybern's general population, which is still pissed off that they lost the war. I assume they're still on their isolated western island, now with a substantially smaller population because almost its entire army died in the war. Plus, they have no king after Nesta beheaded him. Durian has stepped in to lead the human realm of Prythian, using Grayson's family estate as his seat of command. Vasa may continue to be temporarily free from Koschei's entrapment at the lake deep in the continent, but she is still cursed. Remember that Koschei's curse on her turns her into a firebird by day, woman again by night. Rhys and Helion have never seen such spell work and can't find any way to unbind her. It's as if the curse is woven into her very blood. Lucian speculates that Durian would have been crowned king of the human realm by now if it wasn't for Vasa. He's been keeping everything running in a land that has been ungoverned for a long, long time. While Durian and Vasa are mostly aligned for the future of the human territories, their methods for attaining that differ. And unfortunately, that's all we know about that because this is a holiday special after all. I really want to know more. But anyway, we learn in Frost and Starlight that assumably Grayson has gifted Durian and Vasa an old manor house in the southeast of the humans' territory. So this has become their place of residence. I assume this also means the manor will become Durian's new seat of command instead of at Grayson's estate like it had previously been. But what about the 4 remaining human queens that have been awfully quiet since their presence in Hybern when the Cauldron was supposed to turn them Fae? Well, we know one of those human queens, Brialyn, did indeed turn Fae after Nesta came out of the Cauldron, but because Nesta took power from the Cauldron, the process did not go very well for Brialyn. Sure, she turned Fae, that's good, but instead of being young and beautiful as expected, she became an immortal old crone, which means that she's going to have back problems for eternity. That would suck. Even though she does suck too, so she deserves it. Anyway, these 3 human queens plus 1 human-turned old crone queen still have not returned to their own territories on the continent. Instead, they stay closed up in their joint castle. We've previously referred to this joint castle as their headquarters, so that's where they're staying. They're not governing over their own territories. According to Vasa, these queens of the realm will continue to be a threat until they are dealt with. However, unless the queens step out of line or do something, anything, there's not much our crew can do. Because if they come in to deal with them, even if it's preemptively to stop another war, our crew will be seen as conquerors instead of heroes. And they can't risk a negative reputation like that when they need the humans and the other territories to trust them as they work toward lasting peace. So what about Durian and Vasa? Can't these humans deal with the bad queens, especially while Vasa still does have the freedom to before needing to return to the lake? Well, that's a possibility, but Rhys and Farah have agreed that the humans should be given a chance to rule themselves. It's not up to the Fae to tell them what to do, even if they're allies. So it's basically that Durian and Vasa have not taken action against the human queens, so our crew is like, well, that's your choice then. Let's move on to the state of things in the Night Court. Rhys and Farah, when she isn't too busy, have been visiting and communicating with their war allies these past months to solidify their relationships, build trade, and keep tabs on post-wall intentions. Rhys and Cleus have a still lukewarm alliance, though luckily Moore's relationship with Vivian, the High Lord of Winter's mate, is the bridge between the 2 courts. Rhys is working with the 2 priestesses who survived last year's Hybern massacre in Cessair about how to handle pilgrims who want to come from outside the Night Court. Rhys wants to delay that until the spring, though. Speaking of, other priestesses are reaching out to Rhys and Farah to angle for positions. Whatever that means. Like we've mentioned, Valaris is focusing on its rebuilding efforts after the Hybern attack. We already talked about that. Also, like we mentioned, Rhys won't be able to hold off Kier and the Hewn City from visiting Valaris for much longer. The visit will probably be in the spring because Rhys has postponed it for just too long, and Kier already made good with his end of the deal. Now it's Rhys's turn to make good with his end. But the biggest issue right now is Illyria. We talked about the unrest already, so let's expand on it. This unrest is in the aftermath of the war because the the Illyrians took the heaviest hits on the Prythian side. They are angry with Rhys and Cassian for making them go to war and how few of them returned home. The Illyrians, both the males and the females, believe Cassian and Rhys marched the warriors south as revenge for their treatment as children, even going so far to think that some of the males were specifically stationed on the front lines as payback, which, if you remember correctly, it's supposed to be a big honor to be on the front lines, so anyway, the unrest is coming from more clans than Rhys and Cassian expected, even in the worst case calculations. But on the plus side, always got to look at that silver lining, it's only a minority within each clan who are spewing poison about the Bat Boy leaders. As points out, very, very rightly so, quote, they train and train as warriors, yet when they don't come home, their families make us into the villains for sending them to war. There might not be a solution right now, but one thing is for sure, Rhys won't disband the Illyrians because that might launch the very assault they're trying to defuse. He is considering to permanently station people he can trust to enforce consequences. But right now, they just don't have the resources to do that here in Illyria. He's hoping to maybe station someone next summer if the climate elsewhere is calm enough. The truth of the matter is, they barely survived this war and are trying to stop another one from starting, especially when there are so many unknowns gathering outside their borders. After all, there might be another war soon with the human queens on the continent, and our crew needs the Illyrians to fight for them. But don't worry, because in Silver Flames, this will be all resolved with one line, and it is no longer a problem after the blood rite, but we will get to that next episode and beyond. Basically, they needed some tension for Frost and Starlight, and here you go.
You mean, what am I going to get Rhys for Winter Solstice wasn't tension enough? I'm shocked. But let us close out this ACOTAR-only part of the episode with our Fae-vorite Moments. This is so small, but I love how Feyre's powers come alive at the turning of the seasons and how, like, now that it's snowing, her power from Kalias in the Winter Court feels more alive. And now that the water is frozen, her, power from summer seems to be almost slumbering. I love it. We have a rapid fire plant watch. Pine is for rebirth, renewal, and bright, hopeful futures, which is very symbolic of the holiday season. Holly is for fertility and eternal life, which pretty on par with where our, story goes, plus a also symbolic smell for the holiday season. And then when we're in the spring court, we've got dogwoods, which are for rebirth, which I'm pretty sure every single one of these is for, and resurrection. Also lilacs, which is youth and innocence. I don't think anything in the spring court is very specific on symbolism, but pine and holly, very much up the alley.
Definitely. I can't help but relate to Farah and Rhys with how behind they are with all of their letters. I am one of those people who always has hundreds of unread emails in my inbox, and this just makes me feel seen. It drives Nicole crazy how my inbox is.
Actually gives me secondhand anxiety. It's crazy.
Cassian visiting the long-gone village where he was born, where his mother suffered and was maybe buried here, but unfortunately, Cassian will never know for certain. His only memory of his mother is her soft voice and gentle, slender hands, but he has never forgotten her. And he keeps her spirit alive by training these females to give them the resources and confidence to fight back and have a purpose beyond chores. He does this for her, and it is such a sweet moment where he visits this unmarked, unknown grave as a reminder of what he's working toward, a better Illyria. He wasn't able to save his mother from a terrible fate, but he hopes to save others in similar positions as her.
While we're on the topic of Cassian, I love how he purchases every single bit of winter goods from Emery's shop for her to anonymously distribute to the Illyrians. Just like when he was growing up, he didn't have any warmth. He didn't have a roof over his head. He didn't have any clothes for storms like this. And now it's him giving back, but he's doing so completely anonymously. And it's just good as boy Cassian. I love it so much. This is also such a good transition scene as we get used to being in his head and learn what his internal Gryffindor motives are more and more.
It's such a small moment, but Moore was reading up on Winter Court customs in the House of Wind's library. In a few days, she's going to visit Vivian in the Winter Court for their week-long solstice celebration, so it could just be because of that. It could also be to aid her in strengthening the alliance between their two courts. But what if it also alludes to her crushing on Vivian's sister, like you speculated in our ACOWAR coverage, Nicole?
That is so canon. Like, it is so headcanon for me. I love it.
But with that said, I will also say it is absolutely headcanon for me, too, that she and Emery are going to end up together.
Oh, absolutely. But right now, she's crushing on Vivian's sister. We learn about Fae periods. It turns out that Fae have them twice a year, and they are a bitch. I love how Rhys takes care of her, even, like, cleaning her up, and she's in so much pain. Like, Good man button. Just good man. I love it. Speaking of pain, though, this is unforgivable. It turns out that Maja, the court healer, can't do anything for the period pain other than just knock out Feyre. What kind of healthcare system is this? You can literally put internal organs back together into someone's body, but Motrin is out?
I have a theory on this.
Please, for the love of God, give it to me.
I consider this a primer for us that the female body, including menstrual cycles and childbirth, can't be touched by magic in the same way as healing injuries. It's like the magic of this world said, no, this is part of life and you can't change it with your magic. It still doesn't excuse the inability for a C-section, but I find it interesting that there is at least this consistency that the female reproductive system can't be altered or helped by magic in any way, even for something as simple as this. The only thing that can alter it magically is the Dread Trove, which has the ultimate power of the Cauldron. So I consider this foreshadowing.
Okay, I'm actually really grateful you said that because this has bothered me so much since my first full read of the ACOTAR series. So yes, I will hop on this train because this is at least make it make sense. And thank you for making it make sense. Next, I love the return of the thought for a thought moments with Feyre and Rhys. Like, I just miss those ACONAF days so much.
It's a brief moment, but when Feyre thinks about being in one of the palaces here in Valaris during the holiday season, with the twinkling lights and cheerful people in the snow, take me there, oh my gosh, please. She thinks of its painting name, Frost and Starlight. Hey, isn't that the name of this book? It's so fitting that one of the biggest themes and plots of this book is Feyre beginning to paint again to heal her trauma and learn how she can extend that to the community by helping in the aftermath of the war. Not only does Frost and Starlight represent Valaris at winter solstice with all that the holiday symbolizes for this inner circle, but it also reflects Feyre's healing journey as an artist and her contribution to Valaris' healing.
Side note, how badly did you want to put up your Christmas tree after doing this episode or this deep dive part?
I am still slowly bringing out my fall seasonal stuff, which I don't have much of anymore because after we moved across the country, I got rid of most of it because I thought we were going to have a smaller moving truck. And then at the last second, the boys decided to upgrade it to the bigger one and I could have saved all of it, but it's fine. It's fine.
I'm so glad you're not bitter about it.
I'm not bitter about it at all.
I will say I did tell Brett as I was doing this outline, I was like, this really makes me want to bring out our Christmas tree. And he's like, I would not be opposed. So we highly considered bringing out our Christmas tree on September 21st.
Good for you.
Everything about Asriel and Rhys's work talk and just connection. I love getting to see more Asriel dialogue. And whenever he's in smaller groups, it's like his personality just comes out a lot more on the page. There's also this subtle open plot point about him hunting down Bryaxis, which I am convinced Asriel will be in charge of doing with their somehow shadowy connection bond in a future ACOTAR book. But also, I love that Asriel's like, do we have to get the sisters presents? And Rhys is like, really, only if you want to. Asriel's like, I need to go do more shopping. I also want to point out how they're deliberately not telling Cassian about the unrest that is growing in the camps until after solstice. And whose call is this? Rhys's. This is just another instance where Rhys does withhold information from those he cares about. This is also foreshadowing for how he will not tell Feyre that Nyx's wings will hurt her during pregnancy. This is just part of who he is. This is also just more of a fun fact. Rhys mentions how legend states that Ramiel existed before the Night Court formed. Quote, before the Illyrians migrated from the Myrmidons. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. I immediately was curious what Myrmidons were, and it turns out it's from Greek mythology. In Homer's Iliad, the Myrmidons were soldiers who were commanded by Achilles, and Achilles brought them to Troy to fight in the Trojan War. The word Myrmidon comes from Greek word myrmex, which means ant, like A-N-T. And Myrmidons were described as being fierce and hardy as ants. So they're the ant soldiers.
Neve the jeweler is quite the sales female. Her people are master jewelsmiths that dwell in the deepest mountain mines of the Night Court. She is similar to a wraith with a tall, lean frame wrapped in permanent shadows and eyes like glowing coals. I love the descriptions we get of other fairies. Yay for magical diversity. But anyway, she knows Amryn so well and selected several pieces that would suit her beautifully. And Reese is like, yep, I'll take them all. Go, Neve, get those commissions. And yes, such a fitting gift for the one who saved the world and loves to hoard jewelry like a fire drake. At least Amryn would be easy to shop for, even if it would destroy my wallet.
Absolutely. We can't talk about favorite moments without talking about the Fae-vorite and Cassian decorating scene.
This whole scene, like 10 out of 10, no notes. It's such a funny and relatable part, at least for me.
Yes.
Les Fae-vorite and Cassian's friendship have its moment to shine. They've spent 2 books bonding, but it's always while fighting, like in the training ring or over serious conversations. Like, why did you sacrifice yourself and all that kind of stuff.
She's going to sacrifice herself.
Now they can just get drunk and decorate for the holidays and have fun. This is, again, one of those little moments of life that they risk everything for because it's wrapped up in a hug with friendship and celebration and carefreeness and love and wine.
Did I have drunk decorating on my ACOTAR series bingo card? Absolutely not. Is this one of my favorite moments of all of the ACOTAR books? Fuck yes, absolutely. Especially how Azriel then comes in, fixes whatever he can, and then as he finally gives in and drinks from the bottle, he gets caught and nearly spits it all out. It's so good. Oh my God. And of course, another favorite moment. We cannot talk about this section without ending on Amryn. Now that she's high fae instead of whatever she was before, she needs to learn how to pee. Her tutors for learning how to use the bathroom were animals. But she says she knows how to sit on a toilet. How much do you want to bet she's doing it wrong?
I'm sorry. All I can think about, I'm trying to potty train my children right now. It's not going very well. But I bet you Amryn could use a little baby girl cheerleader going poop, 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 because that's what she does for her pro.
That's the cutest thing. Oh my God. Wow. Oh my God. All right, friends, we are about to begin our Maasverse Madness section.
Today's Maasverse Madness includes spoilers for both Crescent City and the entire Throne of Glass series. So if you have not read all the Maasverse books, this is where we part ways. But before you go, reminder that next episode we will be covering episode 2, our final episode of Frost and Starlight, chapters 15 through 28.
And a huge welcome to the Inner Circle, to our newest Inner Circle Patreon members, Sophie S., Jackie, Tessa G., Molly D., Hannah C., Sherry, and Alyssa S. Thank you so much.
And if you're like, hey, I want my name shouted out on the podcast and the girls just shower me with all the love because we love you all so much, go ahead and join the Patreon party. Link is in the show notes.
And we haven't mentioned this in a while, but we have our Fantasy Fangirls newsletter. Every single month, Lexi and I send out a newsletter that includes everything from what we've been up to, upcoming live events, fantasy book recommendations, what we've been listening/reading. We have a trivia question in there. It is jam-packed.
Small business spotlight, usually with a discount. All of it. It's so much. It is a jam-packed newsletter, and you can go ahead and subscribe for this monthly newsletter, again, at the link in the show notes. And of course, if you're not following us on TikTok and Instagram, friends, what are you doing? Give us a follow at Fantasy Fangirls Pod.
And last but not least, please do not forget to rate and review the podcast. It is one of the best things that you can do, not only for this show, but also any show that you listen to. It takes 2 seconds to hit that 5-star button or write a little love note in the review section. And it is seriously the biggest hug you can give to your podcasting friends.
We are now officially entering our Maasverse Madness segment of the episode, where we call out series crossover references and discuss theories. Today, we are discussing concepts that give spoilers from Throne of Glass, including Kingdom of Ash, and Crescent City, all 3 books. So please only continue listening if you've read all the Maasverse books.
In Feyre's opening chapter, she notes how there's a wicked-looking mace on Rhys's desk. I immediately was like, what's this wicked-looking mace? This isn't a throwaway line because it's mentioned twice. And I looked in the Maasverse, and there's 2 other mentions of a mace, and only in the Throne of Glass world. There's one in like Celaena's training montages, basically in the first book. And there's also a mention of the Trove of Aniel when Aelin, Rowan, and co. are basically looting Chaol's dad's weapons for battle and all that kind of stuff. They find ancient-looking maces. could be the same, could be absolutely nothing, but I thought it was something to at least point out. But here's why I really need to be here at Maasverse Madness, because my God, this book gives more and more equals witch material. In case you missed it, I am convinced that Mor is a witch, more specifically a Kraken witch. Number one, the Morgan is a triple goddess of death in Irish folklore. Who do the witches in Tog worship? The three-faced goddess. Number two, her family had the Ouroboros mirror, which I am 1,000% convinced is a witch mirror. Number three, witches are brought up in the Illyrian camp, and immediately Nesta's like, what's the deal with witches? Who answers? Mor. Elaine also asks Mor, what's a seer? And Mor is shocked, but she answers, where else do we see seers in the Maasverse? Number four, when asked why she's third in command, because she's the one who Rhys calls in when Cassian and Azriel are dead, absolutely think that this is because she can perform the yielding. Number five,
wouldn't she die?
Yes, she would. But so are Cassie and Azriel and Rhys, and I'm assuming probably Amber. So which is so terrible, but I'm assuming. Number five, she primarily wears red, which is the color of the Kraken Witch Clan. And honestly, those are all just the recaps that I could think of off the top of my head. I didn't even go back into outlines. That is how prominent this is. But now we're in Frost and Starlight, so we get more parallels. In this first one, I am going to give a small trigger warning because I do discuss stillborn birth, so please listen to your comfort level. In Mor's flashback of her being dumped at the Autumn Court border, she has 3 nails in her abdomen. Again, just another tie into that number 3, aka the three-faced goddess. But you also can't help but think of Asterin. While Asterin's branding was because she gave birth to a stillborn witchling and from a human father, it's not entirely unlike the reason Mor was also nailed, because she is now considered quote unquote spoiled goods. But also some rapid fire from this moment. She mentions how the nails in her are iron nails. Immediately you think of the iron teeth witches with the iron nails. And Mor also wishes that she could grow claws and rip out their pale throats. Again, the iron teeth witches. Everything is right there. This stretch does give me a big Mor question, because Rhys mentions, quote, I knew better than to ask if she thought her mother would come along. We didn't discuss Mor's mother, ever. Why? Is it because she's a witch? And what does it mean?
I thought it was just because she's a bitch. But
maybe she's a witch bitch.
And friends, we are purposefully not going to be including Ramiel or the Blood Rite or any of that kind of stuff here in today's Maasverse Madness, because trust us, we will be getting into all of that in Silver Flames. Again, next week, it is definitely going to be winter solstice. It is upon us, everybody. It is going to be the holiday season here in October, and then it will be posting in October. And
I am definitely getting out at least my holiday decorations for next week's episode. I have to. Thank you, as always, to our executive producer, Hayden, aka our sanity manager. We love you. I'm sorry for editing this episode. This is going to be a tough one.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.